Chance to win £50,000 cash. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live for you from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, welfare payments are set to rocket to an astonishing £100 billion per year under the Labour Party by 2030. On today's show, I'll be joined by Reform's Lee Anderson to ask him, have we gone completely soft on soaring sickness payouts? Is it time to slash these benefits? Should we show work-shy Brits, especially youngsters, some tough love? And that man Donald Trump has threatened to slap 25% tariffs on everything that's coming from Mexico and Canada to force them to take action on border chaos that's seen as many as 21 million illegal immigrants stream into America these past 4 years. But is Trump's plan America first, or is it America's worst option? And a GB News exclusive, because locals in Bassetlaw are furious after hundreds of asylum seekers from the Bibby Stockholm barge have been dumped into their community. I'll be joined by a council whistleblower who slammed the move as a shocking betrayal of his constituents, with allegations of illegals even queue jumping into social housing. It's a sensational exclusive on GB News. That's all coming up on your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. £100 billion. That is the benefits bill we're going to be facing by 2030 unless we get Britain back to work. So Keir Starmer's government said they were getting tough on benefits and clamping down, but today allegations are they've dodged a bullet. They aren't getting tough and they're instead dangling too many carrots and not wielding enough sticks. Well, somebody who wants to put the boot in and get the stick out is Lee Anderson. Britain. He'll be joining me on the show later on to discuss what we can do about Workshire Britain. Is this country fit for purpose? Are people basically skiving? Are they using mental health as a new bad back? Or is something else more sinister going on? Get in touch the usual ways, GBViews at gbnews.com/you'll say. But now here's your headlines with Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall has announced the Job Centre will be brought together with England's National Careers Service to reform a system which she warned feels like you're back in the 80s or 90s. Introducing the Get Britain Working White Paper, Ms Kendall told the Commons we will create a new jobs and careers service, overhauling job centres from a one-size-fits-all service that focus on administering benefits into a genuine public employment service. Official figures show the unemployment rate for young people is at 14.8%, up from 12.1% a year earlier. The plans include a £240 million investment to overhaul the current network of job centres across Britain and more funding for mental health services. Pension Secretary Liz Kendall spoke in the Commons earlier on.
Bringing forward the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation, turning a department for welfare into a department for work, taking the first steps towards delivering our bold ambition of an 80% employment rate in a decade of national renewal. Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing short of fundamental reform is needed to turn the page on the last 14 years.
As you heard earlier, some breaking news this hour. A US Air Force spokesperson says a small number of drones have again been spotted flying near US Air Force bases in Suffolk. The UK authorities are also working to help ensure the safety of the sites. The development comes after unidentified drones were previously spotted between Wednesday and Friday of last week over the same 3 air bases. The US Air Force at the time said it was unclear whether they were considered hostile. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. 5 survivors have now been rescued and 4 bodies recovered after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. The Sea Story boat sank yesterday south of the Egyptian coastal town of Marsa Alam with 44 people on board, including 31 foreign nationals. The governor of the Red Sea says 7 people are still missing. 2 Brits are believed to be among them. A police watchdog says the husband of a woman whose body was found in the boot of a car had been arrested 2 months prior over a domestic abuse report. The Independent Office for Police Conduct also said it would investigate police contact with 24-year-old Harshita Brella and her husband Pankaj Lamba. Miss Brella's body was found inside the boot of a silver Vauxhall Corsa parked in Ilford, East London, in the early hours of November the 14th. Her husband, Lambert, is the prime suspect in the police investigation. An international manhunt to find him continues. Detectives suspect he has fled the country. A legal challenge over whether trans women can be regarded as female for the purposes of the 2010 Equality Act begins today at the UK Supreme Court. The case is the latest in a series of challenges brought by the campaign group For Women Scotland over the definition of woman in Scottish legislation, mandating 50% female representation on public boards. It could have implications for the running of single-sex spaces and services and how measures aimed at tackling discrimination will operate in the future. The Met Office says it's committed to learning the lessons from Storm Bert after criticism of its weather forecasts. The Weather Service also defended itself, saying observed rainfall totals were broadly in line with the forecast and the severe weather warnings issued in advance. The storm, which swept across England and Wales over the weekend, brought torrential rain, flooding and 80-mile-an-hour winds. At least 4 people have died since Storm Bert began, leaving communities badly flooded and turning roads into rivers. The clean-up after Storm Bert is continuing, with Environment Secretary Steve Reed warning more flooding is likely. The Duke of Sussex's legal claim against the publisher of the Daily Mail could face a trial in 2026. That's the suggestion from a High Court judge. The Duke of Sussex and other high-profile people, including his close friend Elton John, are suing the publications for alleged breaches of privacy rules by Associated Newspapers Limited. Harry accuses the publisher of hiring private investigators to place listening devices inside cars and recording private phone conversations. At a hearing today, Judge Mr Nicklin said it was important to progress in the case to an eventual trial. ANL denies all of the allegations. The world's oldest man has died at the age of 112. John Tinniswood was born in Liverpool in 1912, the year the Titanic sank. Guinness World Records says he died yesterday at a care home in Southport. His family said in a statement his last day was surrounded by music and love. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you very much. Now let's get cracking on today's show. It's the biggest reform to employment for a generation, and that's according to the Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall, who's unveiled Labour's long-awaited back-to-work plan today to MPs in the House of Commons. A youth guarantee will see unemployed 18 to 21-year-olds lose their benefits if they refuse to work, but the mention of a crackdown on sickness benefits is nowhere to be seen. And Downing Street has refused to set a target for reducing the nation's benefits bill, which could be set to rocket to a staggering £100 billion per year, every year, by 2030. Now, the Tories are saying it's nothing more than rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And here is the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Liz Kendall, speaking in the Commons a short while ago.
Bringing forward the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation. Turning a department for welfare into a department for work, taking the first steps towards delivering our bold ambition of an 80% employment rate in a decade of national renewal. Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing short of fundamental reform is needed to turn the page on the last 14 years.
But no getting tough on benefits. Let's get more reaction in the studio now. And I'm joined by GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Force. And I'm also delighted to say I'm joined in the studio by the political commentator and the former MEP, Patrick O'Flynn. Patrick, Catherine, welcome to the studio. Let's start with you. Quite a broad spectrum there. It's the biggest reform in a generation, or it's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. £100 billion per year by 2030. Absolutely staggering numbers. What on earth is going on, and how do Labour plan to stop it?
Well, this is a massive, massive problem, and the Tories were beginning to try to address this. Of course, let's not forget they had 14 years. They had plans to bring the benefits down by £12 billion. And Helen Whately is being debated in the House of Commons now. Helen Whately, the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, basically said to Liz Kendall, "Is this it?" But the bill ballooned under the Conservatives. We've got 2.8 million people on out-of-work sickness benefits, effectively, and it's costing £65 billion a year now, projected to go up to £100 billion. So today, what we haven't had is how they're going to get those numbers down, both in terms of getting people back to work and getting the cost down. What we have had is a bit on getting young people, 18 to 21-year-olds, back into work, giving them this youth guarantee of training or apprenticeships, broadening the role of job centres. Some amazing sounding, but I suspect very small in number, schemes with like the Premier League or the Royal Shakespeare Company or Channel 4. But of course, there's been an epidemic of mental ill health since COVID, particularly, also in young people. We also have tons of graduates coming out with massive debt, not enough graduate jobs, and employers saying that they simply have skills shortages because we're not training people for the jobs that are out there.
OK, let's bring you in at this point, Patrick O'Flynn. Something that's just, I find, astonishing. If you look at the numbers of economically inactive people due to long-term sickness, the graph looks like Elon Musk's rocket taking off. It's astonishing how many people are on long-term sick, and particularly since COVID, and particularly the young. 2.8 million in total, and yet 627,000 under 25s, 128,000 year-on-year rise. Patrick, is this an epidemic of mental health, or is it an epidemic of skiving?
I think it's somewhere in between. To be a bit controversial, I slightly blame Princes William and Harry for this because over the last decade, they've come out with this big idea that the way to reduce mental illness is for us all to talk about our mental health all the time, and it's become fashionable to seek a diagnosis, and stuff that my generation, I think, would mainly have regarded as just the everyday strains of life, whether it's stress, anxiety. People are trying to say this means I can't work, or this means I have to have extra time off, and the state seems to have just kept coughing up money. I actually think we're in a position as an economy and the national finances and the tax burden, well, we simply just can't afford to sustain so many people, even if they are ill. I think even if they are genuinely ill, there's a tough message of people can't afford to sustain this level of burden, and maybe life will be tough, but you have to go out to work, even if, you know, that involves discomfort, exhaustion, whatever it might be. So the idea that we can sustain people in their 20s for the next 40 years with very marginal kind of mental discomfort, you know, what would how would we have got on in the Second World War if everyone had exempted themselves by saying I'm stressed?
Well,
or even after the Second World War, I've got PTSD, I can't go back to work. The country would have just crumbled. We can't do this.
And that is a fair point, Catherine. And there's been quite a lot of criticism from the Conservatives. You'd expect that today about the fact there's nothing tough in this about enforcing this piece of legislation. It's more like NHS care, extra support. Does it need more stick and less of the carrot? Because we're in a real quandary here. We can't afford this.
I think the stick is coming. This, in a way, is the easy bit to say we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other. But how do you crack down on people that are basically taking advantage? And I think, too, they're going to have to do this. They've sort of kicked it down the road. But also there will be queasiness, won't there, within the Labour ranks, because this is not something that many Labour MPs will feel that they came in to do, to crack down on benefits. But they will have to do this. And we've seen already that they are prepared to be unpopular. They've kept the two-child benefit cap, for instance. They've taken winter fuel allowance away. They've done lots of things that you wouldn't actually expect from a Labour government. But, of course, they came in saying that they didn't have plans to raise taxes before, beyond what they'd outlined. They've put $40 billion on taxes. They said everything was about growth. And we don't seem to see any signs of getting that growth anytime soon. But if they can't get people back to work, that's critical to growing the economy, isn't it?
Patrick, bring you back in again. You wrote a piece, an excellent piece in the Telegraph today. The headline, I think, speaks for itself. Starmer may soon go down as the most unpopular Prime Minister in living memory. You go through a lot of the reasons which we're all familiar with, the winter fuel allowance, farmers. This is an area where I think the Labour Party are particularly uncomfortable with. This feels a bit George Osborne. This feels a bit Conservative. We've got to stamp down on benefits claimants. Is this another challenge you feel that Sir Keir Starmer has in him, or is it just not natural for him to be this tough?
Well, maybe I'm being over-cynical, but you could argue that lazy people are a core vote block for the modern Labour Party, ironically, given its name. I will be very surprised to see them really driving much stick in all this. I think they'll talk a good game, but I don't see them, you know, fundamentally tackling this. And I have a position on benefits where I actually think in one area there's too much stick, which is people who've paid national insurance and worked for years at a time, decades at a time, paid a lot of money into the system. if they lose their job or their company goes bust through no fault of their own, the state is on their back straight away, paying them a relative pittance in whatever the successor benefits job seekers allowance might be. They're barely even getting their premiums back. But people who've never paid into the system, and obviously if you're sort of 18, 19, 20, you've not had time to pay into the system, seem to be much more leniently treated. And I think that's completely the wrong way round.
Catherine, is that fair? You know, is it fair to say that young people are becoming increasingly work shy? And Patrick there putting the cat amongst the pigeons, the Labour voter is less likely to actually be labouring.
Well, Angela Rayner's bringing these reforms in for working people, isn't she? And let's see where that takes us. But just to pick up on something that was said earlier in the Commons, despite the fact that Liz Kendall's coming along and talking about getting 18 to 21-year-olds in work, often those are, you know, you're starting out in your career, less experience, on a less high wage. But the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has just come along, put £25 billion of employers' national insurance rises. That is directly going to hit employers taking on people at the beginning of their careers on low incomes. They've raised the rate, they've raised the threshold, lowered the threshold, at which you begin to pay it. So on the one hand, they want to get 18 to 21-year-olds into work. On the other hand, some of what the Chancellor's been doing seems to go in totally the opposite direction.
It's a great point. In fact, today, Tesco, Marks & Spencer's, Next, Asda, Halfords, McVitie's, all warning they might have to cut jobs because of this national insurance rate. Patrick O'Flynn, Catherine Forster, excellent. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Let's continue this conversation now. I'm joined by the Head of Operations at the Autonomy Institute, Jack Callum. Jack, welcome to the show. So I don't know how much of that conversation you have heard. Is it unfair to intimate that younger people in particular now seem to be, how should you put it, more work shy than previous generations?
I mean, it was a bit depressing to hear a conversation quite so devoid of any real discussion of the evidence we have of the last 15 years of welfare reforms.
Well, the evidence, we laid the evidence out.
Can I have a start? Can I get off to a start? So, I mean, it's really encouraging to see some changes in this Labour announcement, moving away from a completely punitive approach to think about how investing in the health service, investing in the long-term sickness, which does no real damage to the economy, how that could be addressed, and looking at job centres to see how they could be more collaborative for people in them. So we're not starting off from a position of punitive enforcement, but from collaboration and cooperation to move into the job market. So that's really encouraging. But look, we're a country where 25% of the UK population is in poverty. That's recent research from the Social Metrics Commission, 33% of children. Poverty is terrible for people to find work. Unless we do something about the fact that we have some of the lowest welfare rates we've ever had in the world, people are trapped in poverty, we won't be addressing this big problem. We've had 15 years, pretty much, of punitive welfare reforms, taking money away, squeezing people, introducing harsh reforms. It hasn't worked. More of the same won't work, and we've got to address that if we're going to address the big benefits bill.
Jack, if benefits are so harsh and so punitive, why are there a record number of young people taking them? I did lay out the facts for you there. 627,000 jobless under 25s. Now, that's an increase of 128,000 year on year. Do you think it's going to be beneficial when we're hearing from people like Asda, Tesco, Marks & Spencer's, Next, all saying that Rachel Reeves' national insurance hike will mean they'll be having to make cuts back. Therefore, there'll be less jobs. How can that help young people get back into work?
So there's two sides to the picture here. I think you're quite right, and maybe pick up a little bit on this. That not only do we have a punitive welfare regime, in which people have incredibly low welfare rates, it's impossible pretty much to live on universal credit. But because that rate is so low, there's a taper, which means that moving into work, particularly low-paid work, can make you even worse off. So that needs to be addressed. So you have to look at the labour market too. You know, we have a crisis of insecurity in the economy, of insecure contracts, hours contracts the government has promised action on. We're still yet to see what that's going to look like. So the world of work itself doesn't actually provide particularly many rewards for people to move into it here. So people are trapped in a cycle of life struggling in poverty on benefits and then struggling in poverty in work. Unless we address both sides of the equation, it'll be really hard to make progress.
Can I put a point to you from James Reed? He's the boss, of course, of Reed Recruitment, hires thousands of people every year. He said it's deeply concerning what's going on. Some things happened in our society. We're given permission to young people to withdraw. In the days of old, we would get on with it. We'd get up and get on our bikes. Now, it's never been easier to get onto benefits and get left on them. He's got a fair point.
It's completely detached from reality and the evidence we have from the 15 years. People love the culture wars. People love having people to blame. The evidence shows that our current system traps people in poverty on benefits. People would love to move off it, but they have so many barriers put in their way to moving into work. They have a set of conditions that makes it incredibly difficult to move into jobs because they're not given the security that they need. I think we've got to look at the underlying problems of our welfare system rather than looking at people to blame. We've had 15 years of blaming people. It's only got us this far. We need to look at a different approach that gives people the support they need to move into the workplace.
OK, great stuff. Thanks for joining us on the show. Appreciate your opinions. Appreciate your time. Thank you. That's the head of operations at the Autonomy Institute, Jack Callum. And also thank you, Patrick O'Flynn. Thank you, Catherine Forster, for your expert insights. Now, coming up, Donald Trump has threatened to slap 25% tariffs on everything from Mexico and Canada to force them to take action on what he calls border chaos that's seen as many as 21 million illegal immigrants stream into America in the past 4 years. That's next. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Let's talk to Roger Kisker, who is the legal counsel for the Christian Legal Centre. Good morning, Roger. I'm really impressed, actually, by the fact that this school is taking the government to court on this. It's the only way we might get any sort of change. How important is it for these families who find a local religious school to keep their children in there? And are they all billionaires awash with cash?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is about the fundamental right to educate your children in conformity with your religious beliefs. That's a right guaranteed under the European Convention of Human Rights. And any legislation, primary or secondary, has to be compatible with that convention. And so the basis of our claim is that this is an unfair tax because every country in the EU, first of all, it was by directive that there was no VAT on private education. In the Council of Europe, which is 56 member states, there are no other countries which put VAT on private education. This is an attack on school choice, and this is an attack on honest, hardworking parents who simply want to have their kids educated in a manner which they want them to be raised by themselves. And that, in a democratic nation, should be a given.
Obviously, Labour's logic being, just to provide some balance here, Roger, is that families who send their children to private school can afford the extra 20%, whether they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children at school. They should be able to afford it, and the schools should be able to absorb some of that cost. And that money will be spent in the state sector. Can you see the logic behind the reasoning?
To be honest, I can't, because not every school is Eton. Not every parent has the means to send their children to private education.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, here's one for you, because Donald Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods if, in his words, the countries continue to allow illegal immigrants to come over the US borders. He's also threatened to slap an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods over their government's refusal to make good on a promise to use the death penalty on drug smugglers. Well, to discuss this story, I'm joined now by the US political analyst and the Democrat supporter, Nomiki Konst. Welcome to the show, Nomiki. Always a pleasure to have your company. So Donald Trump said that tariff was his favourite word in the dictionary. He seems to be putting his action where his mouth was. Is it going to be great for America, or is it going to be chaos for America?
I mean, this is not only chaos for America, it's chaos for the global supply chain. This has major implications, not just for the United States and the cost of our goods, which will undoubtedly go up. And it's not like it's about protecting American jobs or American companies, because he's done very little to support American workers, including, the PRO Act was something that he could have backed and didn't. But it's going to affect, like I said, the global supply chain. The USMCA, the deal that is between Canada, the US, and Mexico, is the framework for national and international investors. So by breaking this deal, which is a deal between these three countries, you're actually going to impact the way that investors move money around the world. And if we thought inflation was bad right now, it is going to be so much better, because 40% of the goods that we take in our country, in the United States, come from China, Mexico, and Canada. It's going to be incredibly destabilizing.
But isn't that the point? Donald Trump's not even in office yet. That's not until January the 20th. No doubt people like yourself might be chalking those days off with some trepidation. But the fact of the matter is he's not even in office yet, and he's making these big claims, and it's having a huge impact. Not all of it, I agree, necessarily good. Not if you're a European motor manufacturer. £9 billion has been wiped off their value today alone. Volvo, 2.3 billion quid down. Vauxhall, £2 billion down. But Donald Trump said he was going to do this. A majority of the American population voted for it, and he was saying, sort out the mess on the southern border, Mexico, do your side of the business, or I'll impose those tariffs then. So presumably this is gamesmanship. This is brinksmanship. The threat of the tariff is there. The threat of the deal is there. If they get their house in order, there'll be no need for a tariff. Isn't this just the art of the deal?
Well, I mean, he's notably not a very good deal maker. If you go back and look at his deals he made with whether it was banks and being in debt, or his casinos or other buildings that have essentially imploded, or Trump steak, or the sports teams, or of course the famous plane that he bought the back in the, I think it was like the 90s. This isn't a guy who actually knows how to make good deals, and that's why every economist in the world basically says this is the worst idea ever. And furthermore, to the point is, in the last 6 months alone, immigration has gone down over the border, legal immigration, 40% under the Biden administration, because he did just that. He put pressure on Mexico to contain migration that was coming up through Central America. And, another side of this
But the point is 40% from a massive, massive amount. I mean, we don't know how many people are in Britain illegally. It could be as many as 2 million. There are some estimates there could be as many as 21 million people in the United States illegally. So 40% down on that is still many, many millions. And isn't this the point of these deals? It's like, make good on your side of the bargain, or I'm going to hammer you. That's what he promised before the election, and the American electorate, whether you like it or not, they went for it.
They went for something. I don't know if they necessarily were voting, collectively for Donald Trump because of immigration. I think maybe his most ardent supporters, sure, because instead of talking about the real solutions to the problems, going back to protecting our workers, he points at Mexico and says they're taking your jobs. Well, the reality is most people who are migrating across the border, if they're not only refugees, they're working the jobs that most people in America just don't want, and we know that. Also, they're contributing taxes.
What happens, the same as in this country, Nomiki, is if you become dependent on an endless supply of undervalued, low-cost immigrant labour, then big business gets addicted to it, the middle class get addicted to it, and the consequence of that in Britain was the working class got shafted, and the same thing happened in America. Look at your automotive industries, look at truck drivers, forklift drivers, they've all been decimated. They want the borders controlled. These deals, these threats of tariffs is Trump's method of trying to get Mexico to pull their end of the weight. That's what he's doing.
I think that's what he's claiming. But the reality is if he did care about American workers, he would not be doing things that affect American companies. So with this tariff deal, the tariff burden does not go on the Chinese company. It goes on the U.S. company, the domestic company. And you know that when they have to pay, they're going to cut workers' wages. They're going to put the burden on the worker. And we don't have strong labor laws in our countries. I'm sure you're fully aware. And that's mostly because...
But presumably, Nomiki, at that point, if it costs 25% extra for something from Canada or Mexico, people might buy American. People might actually support American business and make a choice to support their country. And that surely can only be a good thing.
If we were actually manufacturing. He didn't rebuild manufacturing. He claimed to, but he didn't. And as a result, if you're going to pull the goods away from our trade partners, you better have a backup plan. So I personally think this is just a form of creating chaos, which is something that, you know, he has been very adamant about, you know, whether it's ripping to shreds the State Department and our federal government and saying that he wants to make every federal worker at will. That's chaotic. I mean, we need to be a strong country no matter what happens. And so it seems like every move he's making is to destabilize. Now, I'm not going to lie. A lot of this stuff may campaign well to the American people, but there's a very big difference between, I'm sure you've heard the line that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. It doesn't seem like he's governing in prose. It seems like he's governing in a pipe dream because he's just addicted to being on the campaign trail. But that has very serious consequences, not just for us in the United States, but, you know, across the world. And what happens when China's biggest partner is trade partner is the United States, and they lose that? What happens when Canada's biggest partner, the United States? I think it's like 85% of their exports go to the United States. What happens to those countries?
OK, we have to leave it there. Poetic prose, poetically put. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Nomiki Konst. Great sport. Please come back on the show. I really, really enjoyed that. Thank you. Now, loads more tales to come between now and 4 o'clock, including we'll be live at the Supreme Court as judges comment on a controversial legal challenge over whether trans women, that's biological men, can be regarded as female for the purposes of the 2010 Equality Act. But first, here's your headlines, and it's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. Your top stories this hour. Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall has announced the Job Centre will be brought together with England's National Careers Service to reform a system which she warned feels like you're back in the 80s or 90s. Introducing the Get Britain Working White Paper, Ms Kendall told the Commons, "We will create a new jobs and careers service, overhauling job centres from a one-size-fits-all service that focuses on administering benefits into a genuine public employment scheme." Official figures show the unemployment rate for young people at 14.8%, up from 12.1% a year earlier. The plans include a £240 million investment to overhaul the current network of job centres across Britain and more funding for mental health services. Pension Secretary Liz Kendall spoke in the Commons earlier on.
Bringing forward the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation, turning a department for welfare into a department for work, taking the first steps towards delivering our bold ambition of an 80% employment rate in a decade of national renewal. Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing short of fundamental reform is needed to turn the page on the last 14 years.
Some breaking news this hour. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut its Luton van-making factory, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis is now in consultation with unions and employees over the proposals, which will also see it invest £50 million into the Ellesmere Port factory. Stellantis added that it is hoping to transfer hundreds of jobs to the Vauxhall site in Ellesmere Port. A US Air Force spokesman says a small number of drones have again been spotted flying near US Air Force bases in Suffolk. The UK authorities are also working to help ensure the safety of the sites. The development comes after unidentified drones were previously spotted between Wednesday and Friday of last week over the same 3 air bases. The US Air Force at the time said it was unclear whether they were considered hostile. More on this as we get it. 5 survivors have now been rescued and 4 bodies recovered after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. The Sea Story boat sank yesterday south of the Egyptian coastal town of Marsa Alam, with 44 people on board, including 31 foreign nationals. The governor of the Red Sea says 7 people are still missing. 2 Brits are believed to be among them. The identity of those who have been recovered from the water is unknown. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2577 and 1.1987 euros. The price of gold is £2,092 and 87 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,283 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The rest of today will be fine for most of us, at first at least, with just a few showers around, but there is some more rain arriving in the south later, courtesy of this area of low pressure, which will move up from the southwest, bringing cloud, rain and wind, and it will affect southern parts overnight into central areas first thing Wednesday before clearing away during the course of the day. So turning wet and windy across the southwest through the evening. The heaviest rain moving along the south coast there. On top of the rain that we've already had recently, that could cause further localised flooding before it eventually turns drier into Wednesday. And there'll be gusty winds accompanying that. Further north, a very different start to the day for Northern Ireland, Northern England, much of Scotland. Frost and some dense fog patches about first thing, especially for Northern Ireland. But showers follow the more persistent rain in the south on Wednesday, drying up across the southwest as well as Wales during the morning. Clear spells there for Northern England, much as Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still some showers affecting coastal parts, especially for northern Scotland. A cold start to the day, temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered spots and only slowly recovering through the morning. Nevertheless, it's across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England where we'll see the brightest weather on Wednesday. Again, just a few showers into the north. Some fog patches across Northern Ireland could be slow to clear. Meanwhile, into the afternoon, the more persistent wet weather does clear the east and the southeast, although it does turn increasingly windy. That's going to make it feel cold. Highs of 11 Celsius in the south, 4 to 6 further north. Then going into Wednesday night, we're going to see extensive clear skies and, as a result, with light winds as well, temperatures dropping away. So widespread frost and some dense fog around first thing Thursday before a bright day generally. Some rain or showers in the west on Friday and Saturday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Some queues for the M6 on the southbound side this afternoon. Now, currently 2 lanes are combed off Standish down to Bryn, junction 27 down to 25, and queues developing there. It's whilst a collision gets dealt with. Also southbound on the M6, just after Gailey at junction 12. The traffic at a stand. It's all being held to deal with a collision. Queuing in Cambridgeshire, the eastbound A14, the Milton interchange, junction 33 to Fen Ditton at 34. There was an obstruction there. It's being cleared now. It's heavy in patches back towards the Histon interchange at junction 32. And of course, many parts of England still affected by flooding. The Bradford Road in Barford by the Crown Pub in Somerset closed for flooding, as is the Town Bridge in Bradford and Avon, and the A428 in Turvey in Bedfordshire. That is impassable. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:40 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a legal challenge over whether trans women, that's biological men, can be regarded as female for the purposes of the 2010 Equality Act has begun today at the UK Supreme Court. And the case is the latest in a series of challenges brought by the campaign group For Women Scotland over the definition of woman in Scottish legislation, mandating that 50% of female representation on public boards. But that 50% of women could include trans women. Let's go now to the Supreme Court and speak to GB News reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, the trans debate really under the spotlight. JK Rowling, of course, all eyes on this one. What's the latest? When can we expect a resolution?
Well, we won't expect a resolution for quite some time, Martin. It'll actually be next year when the Supreme Court issues its judgment. The court hearing began today and will continue tomorrow. And throughout today, we've been hearing from the representations for Women Scotland, who have been making their argument. And they've been saying, their KC has been saying, that legally speaking, the biological definition is the correct definition, and that is your sex at birth should legally be how it's understood, and the consequences of that are significant, because if legally speaking, if it's biological, then you can protect certain characteristics, you can protect certain spaces. So in the last hour or so, we've heard from their KC, who has said that it is a simple and easily understandable for non-lawyers, an easy definition to uphold. And it protects single-sex accommodations, including in prisons, hospital wards, in sport, crucially, trans men, or rather trans women in women's sport. You know, there's a fairness argument there, one we've heard many times over, and equal pay for women and so on. So the Gender Recognition Act, which means that according to your birth certificate, once you have a gender recognition certificate, once you've changed gender, is important symbolically in terms of the argument being made today, marriage certificates, death certificates and so on, but legally speaking it's very complicated and controversial. Now, earlier today I also spoke to For Women Scotland representative director Susan Smith. This is what she had to say to me earlier today.
It's really important for the ongoing protection and preservation of women-only spaces and services. Our KC set out today some of the issues that could arise if the completely mishmash of definitions of what a woman is or what a man is, as outlined by the Scottish ministers, is adopted, and how in practice that will make the operation of single-sex spaces going forward pretty much impossible. So it's huge risk for women, especially women who are going to be impacted by any changes to these services.
So their barristers are arguing that an ordinary definition, a common sense definition, is the important one here, and we'll hear from representatives for the Scottish Government and an intervention from Amnesty International tomorrow. They'll outline their case, and they'll say, look, the transgender community is a very small slice of the population, and they are persecuted and they deserve protection as well. We'll hear from them tomorrow. But as you say, Martin, this is a hugely consequential issue. It's been going on for many, many years now, and the decision will not just impact those in Scotland, but also everyone across the UK. So it's a hugely important case.
And Adam Cherry, also eyes globally will be all on this case, because it's a legal consequence of massive consequence in itself. Because if it is ruled that trans women qualify to be actual women in the public eye, then they would, for example, be getting jobs, women's jobs, and that would count as a tick in the women's box. An astonishing case. Thank you very, very much, Adam Cherry, for joining us there from the Supreme Court. Excellent as ever. Now, coming up, MPs are debating the tobacco and vapes bill, which the Health Secretary calls an urgent intervention to help children avoid a life imprisoned by addiction. Or is it just yet more nanny state madness? That's to come after this. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The birth rate in Britain has sunk to 1.49, well below replacement rate. Yet policies pursued by both major parties are still to spend huge sums to encourage parents back to their work when their children are still at preschool age. Should we not be helping parents to spend longer at home, asks his new book, whilst recognising that in an age of sex equality, the question is fraught. David Goodhart joins me now
We undervalue the domestic realm, and that has led to lots of the most negative trends in British society. About half of children in the UK are not living with both of their biological parents by the age of 14. We have, of families with dependent children, about 24-25% are single-parent households. You know, mainly mothers, and they're doing, you know, valiant work. But of course, it means you don't have the investment in children that a two-parent family can give. I mean, the reason why it's a care dilemma is that a lot of these negative trends are also kind of intimately related to positive things, like that movement of women into work, the fact that women are no longer so defined by marriage and motherhood, the fact that women and men are freer to leave unhappy relationships. And the challenge for modern liberal societies is, you know, how we hold on to those freedoms but get a better balance, which means, I think, investing more in the domestic realm. We spend a total now of £9 billion on childcare subsidies. Why not give that subsidy direct to young parents so they could then choose whether to subsidise themselves, as it were, to be able to afford to stay at home, or to give it to a nursery, or to give it to granny, or to, you know, to keep it in the home.
GB News.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:48 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, life imprisoned by addiction. And that's what Health Secretary Wes Streeting is trying to prevent with the introduction of the Tobacco and Vapes Bill. And the bill wants to protect children and young people from vape companies, target them specifically with flavours like Gummy Bear and Rainbow Burst. It will eventually go on to stop anyone born from 2009 onwards from legally smoking ever at all in their lives. Well, GB News has taken to the streets of Derbyshire today to find out people's thoughts on the issue there.
It's not really good for your health. I wish I didn't smoke, and I've tried to quit a few times, so I don't think it's such a bad thing to put in place.
Doesn't make any difference. I mean, on my fags, they all made them green, yeah? And they put dirty lungs on it and stuff like that, but that's not going to influence you to say, oh, I'm going to stop smoking. You're smoking because it's an addictive habit.
But I'm really unhappy about the way they add things to. It's just not simple nicotine.
They should be plain wrappers and sort of not flavoured at all, not to make them so appealing.
I can't understand why people do it, to be honest. You know, I don't see the point of it.
There you go, a mixed bag there from the streets of Derbyshire. Now let's have a chat with our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. And we should note that the Tobacco and Vapes Bill has begun being debated in the House of Commons. And as we understand it, Olivia Utley, Nigel Farage is due to speak later. There's a man who likes a fag, but Wes Streeting doesn't. Tell us more.
Well, absolutely. The tobacco and vaping bill was introduced about half an hour ago in the House of Commons. I've just been up in the chamber listening to it. Wes Streeting is sounding very, very vociferous about his determination to get this bill through Parliament. He called smoking the sickness of society. He said that 2 in 3 young people who take up smoking now will end up dying of smoking. The bill, as you briefly mentioned there, it aims to do 2 things. One of them is to slowly outlaw smoking for anyone born after 2009 by annually raising the age at which a person is legally allowed to buy cigarettes. The other part of the bill is intended to crack down on vaping, so to make it illegal to advertise vaping in the same way that it is illegal to advertise cigarettes. It would also, after a consultation, possibly make it illegal to sell, sweet-flavoured vapes, gummy-flavoured vapes, those sort of vapes which are clearly intended to be sold to children. This bill probably sounds quite familiar to many of our listeners because it is pretty much almost exactly what Rishi Sunak introduced in the dying days of his tenure as Prime Minister. Wes Streeting mentioned, actually he quoted Rishi Sunak at length and very approvingly. Streeting claims that it was his idea, Rishi Sunak took it over and now Streeting is taking it back again. You might think that that would mean the bill would have cross-party support, but actually Kemi Badenoch, who was the business secretary under Rishi Sunak, opposed the bill at the time and is opposing it again. Her problem with the bill is that idea of the age escalator. She thinks that it would be ridiculous to be in a situation sort of 20, 30 years' time when a 50-year-old has to be asked in a supermarket whether they've got ID to say whether they're allowed to buy cigarettes or not. That issue was raised by a number of other backbench MPs on the Conservative benches too. MPs have a free vote on this, both on the Labour and Conservative side. That means they're not whipped either way. They won't be disciplined. They won't get in trouble if they don't vote with the government on this. But I think we can expect it to carry forward to the next stage. Rishi Sunak will probably be quite happy about that. It was his sort of legacy for his time in office.
And of course, you're exactly right to point out there's a lot of cross-party support on this. The Lib Dems will probably go for it too. But a lot of people have been saying, Olivia Utley, that this will spark a boom in counterfeit tobacco, contraband, black market tobacco coming in, because prohibition, when has it ever worked, especially with children?
Well, that is the exact argument that a couple of Conservative MPs have just made in the House of Commons. There was a reference to South Africa outlawing tobacco during the COVID pandemic. In that case, 95% of the tobacco trade ended up going underground, and that is a serious concern to lots of particularly Conservative MPs. There is also a danger that this law ends up being sort of unenforceable. There is a stipulation in the law that shopkeepers could be fined £200 on the spot for selling cigarettes to those who are not legally allowed. There isn't a specific age because they will have that age escalator in place, but those who aren't legally allowed to buy cigarettes. Will that really happen? Will there really be a situation where a shopkeeper is asking a middle-aged person to prove that they are 51 rather than 50? It's hard to imagine it, and that's why lots of people are suggesting that this bill could end up being pretty much unenforceable. Wes Streeting's argument back to that is that it won't end up like that because this bill will create a smoke-free generation. Let's see if that argument will hold with MPs.
OK, thank you, Olivia Utley. Excellent stuff. Now, don't go anywhere because in the next hour we're speaking with that man, Lee Anderson. It's fair to say he's got some strong opinions on Workshire Britain. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now, here's your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The rest of today will be fine for most of us, at first at least, with just a few showers around, but there is some more rain arriving in the south later, courtesy of this area of low pressure, which will move up from the southwest, bringing cloud, rain and wind, and it will affect southern parts overnight into central areas first thing Wednesday before clearing away during the course of the day. So turning wet and windy across the southwest through the evening. The heaviest rain moving along the south coast there. On top of the rain that we've already had recently, that could cause further localised flooding before it eventually turns drier into Wednesday. And there'll be gusty winds accompanying that. Further north, a very different start to the day for Northern Ireland, Northern England, much of Scotland. Frost and some dense fog patches about first thing, especially for Northern Ireland. But showers follow the more persistent rain in the south on Wednesday, drying up across the southwest as well as Wales during the morning. Clear spells there for Northern England. Much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, still some showers affecting coastal parts, especially for northern Scotland. A cold start to the day. Temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered spots and only slowly recovering through the morning. Nevertheless, it's across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England where we'll see the brightest weather on Wednesday. Again, just a few showers into the north. Some fog patches across Northern Ireland could be slow to clear. Meanwhile, into the afternoon, the more persistent wet weather does clear the east and the southeast, although it does turn increasingly windy. That's going to make it feel cold. Highs of 11 Celsius in the south, 4 to 6 further north. Then going into Wednesday night, we're going to see extensive clear skies and, as a result, with light winds as well, temperatures dropping away. So widespread frost and some dense fog around first thing Thursday before a bright day generally. Some rain or showers in the west on Friday and Saturday.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The anti-clock M60 struggling, junction 27 to 25. That's the Portwood roundabout towards Bridlington. 2 lanes currently coned off there at the scene of a collision, looking very slow. As it is on the southbound M6 from Standish down to Bryn, junction 27 to 25 there, 2 lanes out at the scene of a collision. The earlier bump southbound M6 just after Gailey at 12's cleared, but still heavy back towards Stafford south at 13. Indeed, the A449 towards Penkridge still seeing residual queues. Between Hereford and Portway, the A4110 closed both ways, follows an earlier collision with emergency repairs underway. A lane shut, anti-clock M25 slow going around Orpington at 4. There's been a bump there. And the FDS on the ferries, delays of up to an hour at the moment between Dover and Calais. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live for you from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. On today's show, welfare payments are set to rocket to an astonishing £100 billion per year, every year, under the Labour Party by 2030. I'll be joined in the studio by Reform's Lee Anderson. In fact, he's right here now. Let me tell you this. He's on his Weetabix. I ask him this. Have we gone soft on soaring sickness payouts? Is it time to cut benefits? Should we show work-shy Brits, especially the young, some much-needed tough love? And that man, Donald Trump, well, he's threatened to slap 25% tariffs on everything imported from Mexico and Canada to force them to take action on their border chaos that's seen as many as 21 million illegal immigrants stream into America in the past 4 years. The question is this: is Trump's plan America first, or is it America's worst option? And locals in Bassetlaw are furious after hundreds of asylum seekers from the Bibby Stockholm barge have been dumped into their community. I'll be joined by a council whistleblower who slammed the move as a shocking betrayal of the constituents of Bassetlaw, with allegations of illegals queue-jumping into social housing. That's all coming up in your next hour. £100 billion per year, every year by 2030. That's the astonishing cost of the welfare budget in the UK. And a huge driver behind that are young people. Record amounts, 627,000 jobless under 25 signed off on sickness, many of them on mental health sign-offs. Is this legitimate? Are they skiving? How can we sort that out? Do they need love, or do they need some tough love? Do they need more stick and less carrot? One man who's in the studio to give his opinion is this man, Lee Anderson. Now, the last time he had a go at problem tenants, he said they should be in fields, picking potatoes in tents. Let's see what he says about benefit recipients. He's coming next, but first, here's your headlines with Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you, and a very good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall has announced the Job Centre will be brought together with England's National Careers Service to reform a system which she warned feels like you're back in the 80s or 90s. Introducing the Get Britain Working White Paper, Ms Kendall told the Commons, "We will create a new jobs and career service, overhauling job centres from a one-size-fits-all service that focuses on administering benefits into a genuine public employment service." Official figures show that unemployment rate for young people is at 14.8%, up from 12.1% a year earlier. The plans include a £240 million investment to overhaul the current network of job centres across Britain and more funding for mental health services. Pension Secretary Liz Kendall spoke in the Commons earlier on.
Bringing forward the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation, turning a department for welfare into a department for work, taking the first steps towards delivering our bold ambition of an 80% employment rate in a decade of national renewal. Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing short of fundamental reform is needed to turn the page on the last 14 years.
Elsewhere, some breaking news now. British troops have been drafted in to help the United States Air Force find out who is responsible for drones flying over 3 air bases in England, sources have said. A US Air Force spokesman said earlier this afternoon that a small number of drones have been again spotted flying near US Air Force bases in Suffolk. The development comes after unidentified drones were previously spotted between Wednesday and Friday of last week over the same 3 air bases. The US Air Force said at the time that it was unclear whether they were considered hostile. Some more breaking news this hour. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut its Luton van-making factory, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis is now in consultation with unions and employees over the proposals, which will also see it invest £50 million into an Ellesmere port factory. A government spokesman said a short while ago, "We know this will be a concerning time for the families of employees at Luton who may be affected. We will continue to work closely with Stellantis, as well as trade unions and local partners, on the next steps of their proposals." 5 survivors have now been rescued and 4 bodies recovered after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. The Sea Story boat sank yesterday south of the Egyptian coastal town of Marsa Alam with 44 people on board, including 31 foreign nationals. The governor of the Red Sea says 7 people are still missing. 2 Brits are believed to be among them. A police watchdog says the husband of a woman whose body was found in the boot of a car had been arrested 2 months prior over a domestic abuse report. The Independent Office for Police Conduct also said it would investigate police contact with 24-year-old Harshita Brella and her husband Pankaj Lamba. Miss Brella's body was found inside the boot of a silver Vauxhall Corsa parked in Ilford, East London, in the early hours of November the 14th. Her husband Lamba is the prime suspect in the police investigation. An international manhunt to find him continues. Detectives suspect he has fled the country. The Met Office says it's committed to learning the lessons from Storm Bert after criticism of its weather forecasts. The Weather Service also defended itself, saying observed rainfall totals were broadly in line with the forecast and the severe weather warnings were issued in advance. The storm, which swept across England and Wales over the weekend, brought torrential rain, flooding and 80-mile-an-hour winds. At least 4 people have died since Storm Bert began, leaving communities badly flooded and turning roads into rivers. The clean-up after Storm Bert is continuing, with Environment Secretary Steve Reed warning more flooding is likely. To the Middle East, where Israel has begun striking Beirut this afternoon after it issued an evacuation warning for the first time earlier on. Israel made at least 10 simultaneous strikes in Beirut's 7 southern suburbs today, as a spokesman for the Israeli military said the Air Force was carrying out a widespread attack on Hezbollah targets there. It comes as Israel's Security Cabinet is meeting to discuss a potential 60-day ceasefire deal with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And finally, the world's oldest man has died at the age of 112. John Tinniswood was born in Liverpool in 1912, the year the Titanic sank. Guinness World Record says he died yesterday at a care home in Southport. His family said in a statement his last day was surrounded by music and love. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you. Now, it's the biggest reform to employment for a generation, and that's according to the Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall, who's unveiled Labour's long-awaited back-to-work plan today to MPs in the Commons. A youth guarantee will see unemployed 18 to 21-year-olds lose their benefits, allegedly, if they refuse to work. But the mention of a crackdown on sickness benefits is nowhere to be seen. And Downing Street has refused to set a target for reducing the nation's benefits bill, which could set to rocket to an astonishing £100 billion per year every year by 2030. Now, the Tories are saying it's nothing more than rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. But first, here's the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Liz Kendall, speaking in the Commons a short while ago.
Bringing forward the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation. Turning a department for welfare into a department for work, taking the first steps towards delivering our bold ambition of an 80% employment rate in a decade of national renewal. Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing short of fundamental reform is needed to turn the page on the last 14 years.
Well, how can we get to grips with Workshire Britain, and how can we solve the epidemic of mental health sickness payments? I'm joined in the studio now by our political editor, Christopher Hope, and also Reform UK MP Lee Anderson from Ashfield to get to the bottom of this. Chris, let's start with you. We've got a massive, massive problem. In fact, it's a £100 billion a year problem now. An astonishing number of young people, especially out of work. 627,000 jobless under 25s. That's gone up 128,000 year on year. The Tories are saying this is rearranging the deck chairs. Liz Kendall is saying it's the greatest reform in a generation. 2 wildly different points. Yeah. Where's the truth?
Well, we've been here before, haven't we, Martin? Here it is. This is called Get Britain Working. This is the white paper that the Labour government's put out. We've seen it before with the Tory party. Nothing is really eaten into the soaring benefits bill. The problem, I think, here is we have got this figure of £60 billion on out-of-work benefits. That goes to £100 billion by the end of this decade, by 2030. In the lobby briefing today with the PM's official spokesman, I asked him, how do we judge your success at GB News? How do we know you're going to be doing well? When will you say you won't get to the £100 billion a year figure? They wouldn't say that. They just simply said, you know, they know the numbers there and we're doing all we can to try and deal with the underlying issues. But this document here, it's signed by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, Liz Kendall at Work and Pensions, Bridget Phillipson at Education, Wes Streeting at Health. They're trying to make it into a cross-party issue here, but a cross-departmental issue, I should say. But whether they get that, I don't know. The big target is getting 18 to 21-year-olds back into work. And that's why there's an expectation, they tell us, to engage, and the consequences will be losing benefits for those who do not engage. That's what they're trying to say to us. But whether it works, we'll wait and see. I mean, just stepping back, I was yesterday at the CBI conference for your programme. And there you got them there telling us the increase in minimum wage, the national insurance employers increase. There's much more reasons not to employ a young person, and yet the government is saying get off benefits. Those two things don't work, don't match up.
In fact, today, Tesco's, Marks & Spencer's, Next, Asda, McVitie's, Reed Employment, they're all saying they were looking to take job numbers down because of all of that. But let's get this back onto benefits. Lee Anderson. To be fair, this isn't just the problem that the Labour Party have. It was pretty bad on the Conservative watch too. In fact, since COVID lockdowns, we've had a terrible ballooning problem with benefits bills. You've heard all this before. Is there anything in today's bill which you think has sufficient teeth to tackle this problem?
Well, I mean, we'll wait and see on that, Martin, but this is a problem. It's been going on for 20-odd years, this has. I mean, I spent, before I came into politics, I spent quite a while working for Citizens Advice Bureau in Ashfield, and we would see people coming to claim their benefits. And I remember one particular case, Martin, a lady came in on a couple of sticks, could hardly walk. You know, you really felt for her, really desperate stuff. Got no money, bad bike, trying to claim, did the appeal for her. You know, a couple of weeks later, I seen her down Mansfield on the disco, on the dance floor, you know, knocking 7 bells out of the dance floor and like sort of break dancing. I'm thinking, my goodness, you know, I've just helped you fill out the benefit form and done your appeal for you, and it's quite frankly, there's nothing wrong with you. Which makes me mad, because there are genuine people out there who need our help and our support, and you tend to find that the ones who need the help and support and that extra benefit, if you like, that financial assistance with their disabilities, they seem to, sometimes they're too proud to claim that benefit and just carry on going to work. Meanwhile, you've got this second, third generation of work-shy, malingerer. You can call it what you want, but they've been brought up in households where there's never been any work. You know, in a place like Ashfield, where we have a tradition of hard-working, you know, coal miners, factory workers, it really you know gets on their goat. They're furious about this. They see so and so down the lane, never done a day's work in their lives. They're sat there smoking the weed all day, 72-inch flat screen.
Are they work shy? Is that fair, or do you blame them, or the choices are very limited to them? And you know,
Chopper, stop talking. They're just bone idle. They've got bone. Some of these families have got bone idleness in their DNA.
Role models to show how to work.
This is the problem. Some of these families have not had role models, second, third generation. They've never seen a dad or mum go to work. Meanwhile, the rest of the street's working to keep that one family. It's not fair, Martin. We need to sort it out. We need to stop the benefits and get these malingerers back to work. So they're paying into the system.
So if you stop the benefits, what you're going to make them do instead? Like, I remember before with problem tenants, when you fight in the Ashfield election in 2019, you said you put them in tents and make them pick potatoes. And all the Liberal media got the knickers in a twist, but the voters locally, they like that kind of thing. Look, well, how would you deal with this? It's easy to sit on the sideline.
No, it's simple. It's simple, Martin. You know, we live in a civilised society where we should all make a contribution. And if we've got genuine sick people, disabled people, we should help and support them. But there's far too many people in this country swinging the lead. And I say, if you don't go to work, if you don't contribute towards society and be a good citizen, then we'll stop your money. Simple as that.
Stop it. Stop the money.
Stop the money.
In totality.
They'll still go to work then. And I've got friends who've come here from other countries, namely India, and they cannot believe how genuine you know, the amount of money people get on benefits in this country. They cannot believe it. You know, my mate Matthew, he runs a New Cross pub in Sutton. He's an Indian chap, came here and made his business. He said, I can't believe it. People are staying at home and, you know, not paying into the system. They're getting money, they're going out, they're going on holiday, they've got cars. It's unbelievable.
Isn't that punishing these young people for the sins of their parents who aren't showing them how to get a job in the first place?
No, it's not punishing them, it's being kind. It's tough love, like Martin said earlier. You've got to show these people that the way out of poverty in this country is through hard work, it's through education, it's through training, it's through opportunities.
Your story is one of striving. You walked when you sold your car, didn't you? I think, and you walked,
I did, yeah.
You used to walk to work when you're at the mine.
I was Chopper. Yeah, I was a single parent, and you know I had a car, and I thought, well, I've got to make a few savings here. Money's tight, so I decided to get rid of my car and walk everywhere. I lost a bit of weight as well.
Maybe we should do the same again, Lee. But on a serious point,
that's rude.
James Reed from Reed Recruitment. He hires thousands and thousands of people. He made a point which struck me earlier on. He said it's deeply concerning that something has happened in our society. We've given permission to young people almost to withdraw. He's talking about how easy it is to get signed off on sick for mental health and how they're never checked upon and how we are actually betraying these people and doing them a disservice by making it so easy to get onto benefits.
Well, I spoke very, very recently to a public service worker on a good salary who said to me, if I wanted to spend a little bit more time at home with my family, all I've got to do is go to the doctors and get a sick note for mental health or anxiety. He says, and I can have 6 months off, full pay, another 6 months off on half pay, go back to work for a week, then drop off again. This is where the problem is. You know, it can be far too profitable, Martin, for people to get signed off. GPs aren't that bothered, sign a bit of paper, go on, clear off. But this is taxpayers' money. And then, you know, if we sort of doing that, if people who are actually working are doing that, and that breeds into the next generation of, you know, families, young people seeing that their parents have not gone to work, they've done okay-ish by not going to work, it's going to pass on to the next generation.
Can I mention a story which just broke in the bulletins there, and that's about I think the tragic closure of the Vauxhall plant at Luton, 1,100 jobs. You know, when you talk about getting people back to work, when you think about the fact, you know, when we were like growing up, you know, we made stuff in Britain.
Yeah, we did.
You know, we had pits, we had factories, the lace market, of course, in Nottingham, where we're both from, and now our motor industry was always said during Brexit that would go. That didn't happen, but this is very, very sad news.
Well, we're looking at government intervention here. Vauxhall is saying they've closed this Luton plant making vans as net zero rules force them to curtail sale of petrol vehicles. Now, what that means is from 2030, this government is abandoning the sale of new petrol vehicles. Now, in the meeting today with the PM spokesman, we asked at the meeting, will you move that to 2035? There's a big dinner tonight, the SMMT, the Society of Motor Manufacturing Trade, the meeting with the business secretary. They are not going to budge on that, but they recognise the slump in sales of EVs, and that's part of the crisis affecting part of this industry. And this looks like it's part of that target.
Lee Anderson, anybody with half a brain could have seen this come in. We're seeing across continental Europe, Volkswagen, BMW, Porsche, all of them are laying back production because of these electric vehicle targets. People don't seem to want them. They can't seem to be incentivised to buy them. Now this has become a problem on our shores. Is this evidence to you that net zero is killing British industry?
All these disastrous roads and, you know, the end with net zero, they do, Martin. And these electric vehicles, I've always said from the beginning, I think they're a white elephant. I went round a local garage at the weekend looking at second-hand cars, and I was astounded at how many electric vehicles were there, literally just 1-2 years old. People
knocked down in value as well.
Exactly. People are getting rid of them. They're unreliable. You struggle to find a place to charge them up. And, you know, people are holding on to their diesels and petrol cars. Now, I've got a diesel car. I'm going to keep hold of that for as long as I possibly can. We've been sold a pup.
If we're not careful, we'll be like Cuba, I reckon. We'll have petrol cars that we sort of maintain for 50 years. Seriously, I've got a diesel car. I have to pay 12.5 quid to use it every day, but I'm too tight to buy a new car because I don't want to be forced to buy a car I don't want. I think that's the way people are going.
Is the issue EV charging points? So you can't risk your drive to Ashfield?
It's no cheaper, though, Chopper, is it? No, I think people, you know, their bills on these cars are no cheaper than using a petrol or a diesel car.
Well, we can't carry on, though, Lee, can we? I mean, you have to deal with the emissions, don't you? You must agree with
that. You sound like a wet over there, Chopper, at the moment. You need to stop this nonsense. Honestly, mate, listen, we produce less than 1% of the world's carbon emissions. You know that. You've just been to Brazil polluting the airways, haven't you? You stand need.
Chopper, well, the chopper has finally landed. Thank you very much for coming in. Lee Anderson, always a pleasure. And to you, Chris Hope, excellent stuff as ever. Now, moving on, because a small number of mystery drones have been spotted flying near US Air Force bases in Suffolk. And it follows the sightings of small unmanned aerial systems that were seen last week over RAF Lakenheath and RAF Mildenhall. Well, it's a development story, and I'm joined now by our Homeland Security editor, Mark White, who can tell us more. Mark, what's the latest?
Well, a really intriguing story, this, according to military sources from the US with regard to these drones. They say they're of a type that isn't consistent with the hobbyist drones that many people have, of course, and fly round and about. But they have been flying, it seems, in sort of tandem, about half a dozen or so of these drones up over RAF Lakenheath, Mildenhall and Feltwell as well, 3 US bases in the east of England. Lakenheath, of course, is home to the combat jets, the F-15 Strike Eagle and the F-35A Joint Strike Fighter, and Mildenhall, well, that's home to surveillance aircraft, so very sensitive sites that these drones are up over. We've just had it confirmed from the Ministry of Defence that British military personnel are now assisting the US in trying to establish exactly what these drones are, where they've come from and what their purpose is up over these very sensitive sites. We know, of course, that these drones can be very disruptive in the past. You'll remember back in 2018 when 2 drones were seen flying over the runway at Gatwick Airport for 3 days, closed down that airport completely and led to the cancellation of more than 1,000 flights, 150,000 passengers who had their flights cancelled. And they've never, after all these years, been able to get to the bottom of where these drones came from, what exactly they were trying to do. And a great deal of concern, of course, will be, and suspicion will be pointed towards Russia, potentially, grey zone activity. They refer to this as, we know that drones have been utilised to great effect in Ukraine by both sides in that conflict. We also see them used very significantly in the Middle East at the moment, but they don't have to be carrying explosives to cause disruption. Drones can be used for gathering intelligence. They can also just be used as a disruptive presence, knowing that their presence in a restricted area might cause a great deal of disruption. So a lot of mystery to this one, but the very latest breaking line is that the Ministry of Defence in the UK has now assigned British military personnel to assist the Americans at these Air Force bases.
OK, excellent stuff. Thanks for that update there, Mark Wyatt, on the mystery drones at RAF Air Base. And we've got some more breaking news for you now, and it's this. Russia has barred cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper and Rachel Reeves, from entering the country under new sanctions published by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Jonathan Reynolds and Ed Miliband are also amongst the 30 British citizens listed. And the Russian ministry said it was putting members of the UK's political and military establishment, as well as journalists, on its stop list. And meanwhile, Downing Street has denied allegations that the UK diplomat kicked out of Russia was a spy. They said, to be clear, we refute these allegations. They're baseless. We're now considering our response, a Number 10 spokesman has said. Now, coming up, Donald Trump has threatened to slap 25% tariffs on everything imported from Mexico and Canada to force them to take action on what he's calling the borderline chaos that's seen as many as 21 million illegal immigrants stream into America in the past 4 years. Is Trump's plan America first, or is it America's worst option? That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, It happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
What do you think?
Morning. I think we have failed young drivers as a society, and we need to train them better and train them earlier. I think that the idea of stopping them carrying passengers for 6 months is a good idea because you've got peer pressure within a car. So yes, but I think graduated licenses are really difficult. You've got what we call the 3 E's, which is education, educating kids to drive earlier, and engineering, which is making roads better and safer, and then comes enforcement at the end of it. So I think we're failing in these two first ones, the education and the enforcement. I put my kids, all three of them, through a thing called Young Driver, which allows under 17s to drive on private land with ADI instructors and learn the craft of driving and all the below the dashboard stuff and hazard awareness long before they try and do this very compressed period of time to learn about driving. I think we're failing them. So I want to see it in schools, and I want to see them being taught much, much earlier.
Nobody's actually pointing the finger of blame, I think, at the young driver, but maybe young drivers don't understand how different it is. You feel you can drive, you've passed your test, and then a load of your friends get in the back, and suddenly the mood is different, the pressure on you as a driver is very different, showing off, just larking around and having a great time. Aisha, how do you feel about the fact that clearly young drivers do need to be protected almost from themselves, don't they?
Well, I do agree with some of what Quentin has just said, especially about starting early and especially about getting young people used to the dangers of being on the road.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to 4:26. Now I've got some breaking news for you now. Chris Hope, something from lobbyists come out. What is it?
That's right. My colleague Adam Cherry has been talking to the PM's official spokesman. The PM has met today the NFU president, Tom Bradshaw, to listen to the concerns. The government says they're always willing to meet key stakeholders because that's what serious grown-up government does. They believe that the change to the IHT, the inheritance tax and other tax measures hitting small farms is important. But it's really significant, I think. We had this first meeting until this point. Yep. We haven't yet seen the PM meet with the NFU chief. Whether it goes anywhere further, scaling back the IHT plans, allowing 80-year-olds, whatever, not to be allowed to be part of those plans, wait and see. But it could be the first chink in some good news for farming.
Well, the NFU wanted that meeting. Let's find out the details when we get them. Chris Hope, thank you for that breaking news story. Now let's move on, because Donald Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods if, in his words, the countries continue to allow illegal immigrants to come over the US border. And he's also threatened to slap an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods over their government's refusal to make good on a promise to use the death penalty on drug dealers. And we go live now to Washington, D.C. and speak to the Democratic strategist and the former spokesperson for Barack Obama, Federico de Jesus. Federico, a delight to see you. So, in your opinion, is this America first or is it America's worst nightmare?
Hi, Morgan, and thank you for having me on. So this is obviously a tax. Democrats warned on the campaign trail that Trump would impose on American consumers who will pay for those tariffs. And we're talking about the two top trading partners that represent hundreds of billions of dollars in goods traded every year. And it's also illegal given a free trade agreement that Donald Trump negotiated. USMCA used to be NAFTA, which he railed against. He negotiated a new treaty and said that this was the best free trade agreement ever. And now he's wanting to violate that on the cusp of its renegotiation because it sunsets next year. So this might be a negotiating tactic, but Mexico, as of a few minutes ago, their president threatened to retaliate with tariffs of their own, which is what happens when free trade agreements get violated.
Yeah, but Mexico is incredibly dependent upon selling its produce to America. And isn't this gamesmanship, brinksmanship? Donald Trump said he was going to do this. He said tariffs was his favourite word in the English language. He said Mexico needs to pull its weight and control the border. The illegal streaming in, the tariff was a penalty, a threat if that wasn't adhered to. And the same with Canada, because, of course, to the northern border, illegals coming over the border there, a feeling that nothing is being done, that's enough. This isn't necessarily being imposed yet, but the threat might make the countries take action.
Well, look, the last time Trump did this, he got Mexico to militarize its southern border with Guatemala. And so this may be, again, a negotiating tactic. We remember when Trump was president that he tweeted a lot, but we wondered whether those tweets translated into actual executive orders or regulations or were actually getting carried out. So we still don't know, and we still don't know what private conversations have been had. But if, again, those tariffs are imposed, as he says he would on day one on January 20th, that would mean the products will be a lot more expensive for American consumers, a drag on the economy, and it would be contrary to Trump's other promises to lower prices for Americans. Yes, he did promise tariffs, but he did say that it was to help consumers, which clearly they will not. And we can also remember when he imposed tariffs on China and other countries during his presidency, he also issued a lot of waivers to donors of his campaigns and favored industries. So we don't know exactly if or how these tariffs will be carried out.
But Federico, quickly, the fentanyl issue is massive in America. 75,000 Americans died last year of fentanyl overdose. The huge problems, we've seen it, zombie landscapes of many cities. And of course, those drugs are ostensibly produced in China. Donald Trump wants them to stop pumping them over to Mexico. They're being took over the border again. The China drug route through Mexico into America, killing Americans. Seems fair that he wants to stop that.
Well, but arms and weapons are also being trafficked from the United States to Mexico. So these are issues that need to be resolved through cooperation. Trump has threatened to target narco traffickers as if they were terrorists and basically invade a sovereign country. And that might be bluster, but again, if carried out, would be a gross violation of sovereignty, and I don't think conducive to solving the problem. The idea would be for the U.S. to help Mexico prevent China from importing those drugs, not to punish Mexico in such a way that they're decimated and therefore have a weaker government to tackle these challenges.
OK, well, he's not even in office until January the 20th, but he's already setting the tempo. I guess that's what he does. Former spokesperson for Barack Obama, Federico de Jesus. Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you on GB News. Cheers. There's loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including locals in Bassetlaw. They are furious after hundreds of asylum seekers from the Bibi Stockholm barge. Remember that? Well, they've been dumped now into their community. I'll be joined by a council whistleblower who slammed the move as a shocking betrayal with allegations of illegals queue jumping into social housing. That's coming soon, but first, here's your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. Your top stories this hour. And some breaking news. Russia has barred cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper and Rachel Reeves, from entering the country under new sanctions published by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Jonathan Reynolds and Ed Miliband are also among the 30 British citizens listed. The Russian ministry said it was putting members of the UK's political and military establishment, as well as journalists, on its stop list. It comes as Russia earlier on expelled a British diplomat and accused him of spying. Downing Street has denied those allegations, labelling them as baseless. Some more breaking news now. British troops have been drafted in to help the United States Air Force find out who is responsible for drones flying over 3 air bases in England, sources have said. A US Air Force spokesman said earlier this afternoon that a small number of drones have again been spotted flying near US Air Force bases in Suffolk. The development comes after unidentified drones were previously spotted between Wednesday and Friday of last week over the same 3 air bases. The US Air Force said at the time it was unclear whether they were considered hostile. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut its Luton van-making factory, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis said it is now in consultation with unions and employees over the proposals, which will also see it invest £50 million into the Ellesmere Port factory. A government spokesman said a short while ago, "We know this will be a concerning time for the families of employees at Luton who may be affected. We will continue to work closely with Stellantis, as well as trade unions and local partners, on the next steps of their proposals." Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall has announced the Job Centre will be brought together with England's National Career Service to reform a system which she warned feels like you're back in the 80s or 90s. Introducing the Get Britain Working White Paper, Ms Kendall told the Commons, "We will create a new jobs and career service, overhauling job centres from a one-size-fits-all service that focuses on administering benefits into a genuine public employment service." Official figures show the unemployment rate for young people is at 14.8%, up from 12.1% a year earlier. The plans include a £240 million investment to overhaul the current network of job centres across Britain and more funding for mental health services. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The rest of today will be fine for most of us, at first at least, with just a few showers around, but there is some more rain arriving in the south later, courtesy of this area of low pressure, which will move up from the southwest, bringing cloud, rain and wind, and it will affect southern parts overnight into central areas first thing Wednesday before clearing away during the course of the day. So turning wet and windy across the southwest through the evening. The heaviest rain moving along the south coast there. On top of the rain that we've already had recently, that could cause further localised flooding before it eventually turns drier into Wednesday. And there'll be gusty winds accompanying that. Further north, a very different start to the day for Northern Ireland, Northern England, much of Scotland. Frost and some dense fog patches about first thing, especially for Northern Ireland. But showers follow the more persistent rain in the south on Wednesday, drying up across the southwest as well as Wales during the morning. Clear spells there for Northern England, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still some showers affecting coastal parts, especially for northern Scotland. A cold start to the day, temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered spots and only slowly recovering through the morning. Nevertheless, it's across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England where we'll see the brightest weather on Wednesday. Again, just a few showers into the north. Some fog patches across Northern Ireland could be slow to clear. Meanwhile, into the afternoon, the more persistent wet weather does clear the east and the southeast. Although it does turn increasingly windy, that's going to make it feel cold. Highs of 11 Celsius in the south, 4 to 6 further north. Then going into Wednesday night, we're going to see extensive clear skies and, as a result, with light winds as well, temperatures dropping away. So widespread frost and some dense fog around first thing Thursday before a bright day generally. Some rain or showers in the west on Friday and Saturday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Queues for the southbound M6 continue. 2 lanes shut from the Orrell interchange down to Bryn, junction 26 to 25. Delays there at the scene of a collision. Now the earlier bump on the anti-clock M60 is cleared. Still slow though towards the Stockport Pyramid at junction 1. A couple of issues on the M25 clockwise this afternoon. A lane closed on the entry slip coming on at Chertsey at 11. There's been an accident, so that's slow. Also clockwise, a breakdown blocking lane 1, Enfield 25 to Waltham Abbey 26 in the roadworks. A queue for the M27 westbound, Wickham at 10 through towards Fareham at 9. A breakdown blocking the inside lane, that's causing delays. And on the ferries on DFDS between Dover and Calais, delays still being reported of up to an hour this afternoon. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth, about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, Labour is moving 400 asylum seekers from the Bibby Stockholm barge, remember that, to hotels in the Midlands, aiming to shut it down by Christmas, if indeed it ever got truly open. Locals in Wolverhampton and Worksop aren't happy, but the government says this will help to ease overcrowded centres and to cut costs. Well, the asylum debate continues to heat up as both sides clash over the crisis. And joining me now to discuss this is the councillor of Bassetlaw District Council, Fraser McFarland. Fraser, welcome to the show. So you're a council in Bassetlaw, and as I understand it, your constituency has seen the arrival of, how many is it, hundreds of people from the Bibby Stockholm. Tell us how you found out and tell us the impact you're hearing from your constituents in Bassetlaw.
Thank you, Martin. We found out because a local refugee charity posted it on social media pages. We had no actual form of communications either from the Home Office or from the council to inform councillors this was happening. So we only really found out because this charity was asking for local support for refugees being rehoused into the area.
So they were foisted upon you with no say, there was no announcement. You had to find out yourself. And of course, at that point, people, to put it mildly, weren't particularly happy. In fact, you said yourself, you felt that this was a shocking betrayal of the local community. Tell us more about the feedback you've been getting from people locally.
The feedback's been really terrible. We have a long issue in Bassetlaw of people waiting for social housing. We've got a long list of social housing that is still needing to be repaired so it can be put back out for rent. And people feel that they are being pushed to the back of the waiting list as other people are being prioritised above them, which I don't believe is fair to local residents who need this housing.
I mean, we hear this nationwide, and of course the government continually deny that there is any queue jumping going on. But you're saying that's what people are telling you, right, locally in Bassetlaw?
Yeah, that's what residents have told me. I've wrote to the leader of the council at the end of October with a number of questions relating to this. I haven't yet received a response to that. So hopefully we can get some a response to that shortly, and these questions can be answered.
And as we always hear in these cases, there's a feeling, is there not, that British taxpayers are continually at the back of the queue. And of course, this will place further strain upon resources locally, doctor's appointments. I know that when we tried to do this interview yesterday, Fraser, and you had a doctor's appointment, you were so surprised you got a doctor's appointment that you cancelled the interview at short notice because it's so hard to get a doctor's appointment in Bassetlaw. So things like that must really make local people feel that once again, they're just simply at the back of the queue, an afterthought.
Yeah, it's very difficult locally. We've had a lot of house building by the Labour Council over the last few years, and there is a shortage of doctors' places, school places. The infrastructure hasn't been put in with the housing, and now we've got this on top of that. The council recently put out a consultation because it's got a £3.5 million black hole in its finances, and we've still got difficulties with that.
And Fraser, as I understand it, a local resident put in a freedom of information request to find out where they were being housed. And you found out this is pretty dispersed, pretty widespread throughout the area.
It is. The local resident lives in Retford. She put in a request after a refugee was actually housed next to her and tried breaking into her property. So that's why she put the FOI request in, and then it gave a breakdown in terms of postcodes of where the council thought was appropriate or not appropriate to house refugees across Bassetlaw.
And Fraser, we hear continually, why can't the council stop this? Why can't you get involved and stop it happening? As I understand it, the council was completely bypassed. Was this another cosy deal between the Home Office and Serco, the company that's going around doing this, and the council have simply been cut out? The local community have had no say, no chance to resist. It's simply a fait accompli.
Serco seems to be pushing a lot of this. One thing I didn't realise until we got told by the council was, if someone fails asylum claim, they are actually given notice to leave their Serco property, and then it's the responsibility of the council to find them housing, even if they've been told they've got no right to remain in this country, which I was not aware of until we got told this by the council.
So this means that when they become, at that point, I guess, homeless, but still here illegally, it's then the council's responsibility to house them, which of course means that a Bassett Law resident will get bumped off the queue.
Yeah, because at that point it's emergency housing, so then they get treated differently.
Astonishing stuff. Thank you very much for sharing that story with us, Fraser McFarland, who called it a shocking betrayal of local communities. And you added Labour's answer is to prioritise illegal migrants while local families struggle to find housing. Fraser, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon here on GB News. Now, a Home Office source told The Telegraph that the government is acting step by step to get the system back on track to increase border security, end hotel use and re-establish an asylum and immigration system that is properly managed and controlled so the system is fair. But this, to a lot of people in Bassett Law, didn't feel particularly fair. Well, coming up a little later in the show, we'll discuss how residents in the Falkland Islands are gushing with joy after a giant oil discovery under the islands is twice as big as what's under the North Sea. And even better, Ed Miliband has no power to stop drilling licences being issued, meaning it could be boom time for the islanders. And I'll be joined by the Falkland Island hero, Simon Weston. Can't wait for that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now we're joined now by Sophia Viraji, the co-founder of the Azealia Foundation, which was created due to the tragic passing of her 8-month-old daughter to leukemia. The foundation is doing some incredible work for children's cancer.
Yeah, some really incredible stuff. They've just launched a PhD even where they're funding young doctors to specialise in childhood cancer as, get this, I wasn't aware of this, it's one of the most underfunded areas in the NHS. So not many sectors choose to go down that route, unfortunately. The charity, the foundation, have donated over £1 million worth of equipment to hospitals as well, and we're delighted to welcome Sophia. You've turned a tragedy and grief into triumph, I guess, and something so inspiring. Just tell us about that. Do you recognise that in yourself and the work you're doing?
Yeah, I'm here to always honour my daughter and to always continue her name, her legacy, and to support all of these other children fighting against childhood cancer.
It was all over social media. I mean, you were at one point probably one of the most famous families in this country because of Azealia and Azalia's fight. When you look back now at that time, does it give you comfort that you had so many people behind you?
Absolutely. The community that we have got, the humanity that we've seen in the UK and all around the world, in fact, has really touched my heart. And that kindness, love and support has always been the backbone of carrying me through this, to give me hope, to give me belief. And it still inspires me and encourages me till today to continue to do that, to show that light, to show that courage and bravery.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 10 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, are antidepressants for dogs really about helping them, or is it simply easing the owner's guilt? Well, as more pets get meds like fluoxetine, critics wonder if it's masking deeper issues. That's Prozac. That's the medical name for Prozac. And while the drugs can ease anxiety, should we focus more on training and care instead? I couldn't believe the story when I saw it this morning. I thought it was April Fool's Day. Pets on Prozac. Let's find out the thoughts of our guest, who is a dog behaviourist, nutritionist and the host of a Dog's Life podcast. It's Anna Webb. Anna, when I saw this story this morning, I thought, what kind of dog owner gives their dog Prozac? And guess what? It's a former BBC reporter who puts Prozac in a cube of pate and gives it to a depressed dog. It's probably the most middle-class story I've ever heard in my life. Am I being cynical, or actually, is there a market to put pups on Prozac?
Look, hey, Martin, I'm very mixed on this, I will say. I know that originally Prozac apparently was tested on dogs. So apparently dogs, can accept Prozac. However, there's my cat. However, there are side effects that have been reported of dogs being given, this puppy antidepressant. For me, I'm all about looking at dogs as dogs. Dogs have communication. Dogs are enormously intelligent. Dogs have their way being dogs. They're not little people in a furry suit, which is something I do say a lot, as I feel this ongoing humanization of dogs is indeed a worrying trend, as dogs are great as they are. They're fantastic. And having an understanding of why dogs become anxious, why dogs maybe become a bit reactive, is really important from the get-go, from the moment you bring your puppy home. Now, look, a lot goes on with puppies' brains before you actually do bring them home. And I feel part of the problem is that a lot of people are just buying dogs on the internet, not knowing the provenance of these puppies to begin with. And when you think that dogs' brains develop so much more quickly than ours, in the first 7 weeks, so many good things can happen to a puppy and so many bad things can happen to a puppy, that it's very important to look at this holistically.
I've got to say, though, I do like that little dachshund there in a Santa's outfit. Call me a cynic. But Anna, on a serious point, this dog in question was actually a Romanian rescue dog. So again, we don't know what it may have been through in its previous life. It was hiding behind the sofa, couldn't get out. And so in desperation, the owner turned to Prozac for his pooch. But I'm with you on this point, that we seem to medicalise everything now. We seem to prescribe drugs for everything now, be it humans, be it dogs. But of course, dogs do get anxious. It is a serious point, but without going towards prescribing drugs for our poochers. Anna, what kind of things can we do to help to make our dogs more relaxed and to ease their anxiety in a non-medicinal way?
Okay, well, there's a huge amount you can do. I mean, firstly, really understanding dogs and what makes them tick. Understanding the individual dog that you have brought into your home. There's a great trend at the moment for, these designer doodles. Now, a lot of them are high drive dogs. These poodles are crossed with working Cocker Spaniels. So that means your dog will need a lot of exercise every single day. Now, I do believe, that, okay, I know Rory and I followed his story with Sophie. And of course, she's an extreme case. She traveled a long way over from Romania in a van. All sorts of things have happened to her. And hearing that the Prozac is working for her is, of course, really good news. However, I would hope that bit by bit, you know, they will wean her off the Prozac and rely on the positive reinforcement training that I know has been going on with her. And this is something I stress to everybody. You know, there's other alternatives. There are a lot of herbs out there, for example. Look, I'm also a qualified naturopath, so I do believe generally in keeping medication to an absolute minimum and, you know, looking at other ways to help your dog, namely you are what you eat. I mean, I firmly believe
Anna, I can taste your enthusiasm. We've simply run out of time. We have to leave it there. Anna Webb, superb. Thanks for your company on the show. Now, in a few moments, I'll be speaking to Simon Weston about the fact there's an oil boom under the Falkland Islands. Can't wait for that. That's coming next. But first, here's your weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The rest of today will be fine for most of us, at first at least, with just a few showers around, but there is some more rain arriving in the south later, courtesy of this area of low pressure, which will move up from the southwest, bringing cloud, rain and wind, and it will affect southern parts overnight into central areas first thing Wednesday before clearing away during the course of the day. So turning wet and windy across the southwest through the evening. The heaviest rain moving along the south coast there. On top of the rain that we've already had recently, that could cause further localised flooding before it eventually turns drier into Wednesday. And there'll be gusty winds accompanying that. Further north, a very different start to the day for Northern Ireland, Northern England, much of Scotland. Frost and some dense fog patches about first thing, especially for Northern Ireland. But showers follow the more persistent rain in the south on Wednesday, drying up across the southwest as well as Wales during the morning. Clear spells there for Northern England, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still some showers affecting coastal parts, especially for northern Scotland. A cold start to the day. Temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered spots and only slowly recovering through the morning. Nevertheless, it's across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England where we'll see the brightest weather on Wednesday. Again, just a few showers into the north. Some fog patches across Northern Ireland could be slow to clear. Meanwhile, into the afternoon, the more persistent wet weather does clear the east and the southeast, although it does turn increasingly windy. That's going to make it feel cold. Highs of 11 Celsius in the south, 4 to 6 further north. Then going into Wednesday night, we're going to see extensive clear skies and, as a result, with light winds as well, temperatures dropping away. So widespread frost and some dense fog around first thing Thursday before a bright day generally. Some rain or showers in the west on Friday and Saturday.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again. I'm Jules Buckley. Cumbria, the southbound A6 currently closed from the M6 junction 42, that's Carlisle South, down towards Penrith at the scene there of a collision. On the westbound M62, a lane shut for medical emergency, so delays are on Gilderson at junction 27, a lane closed on the entry slip there as well. It stop-starts southbound M6 from Coventry at 3 down to junction 2, a queue back to the Corley services. Lane 1's coned off to assist a collision. Clockwise M25, a breakdown blocking the inside lane, so slow going in the roadworks. Enfield towards Waltham Abbey, junction 25 to 26. Flooding still affecting Bradford and Avon, Market Street and the Town Bridge closed, and also in Somerset, Bath Road in Kelston by the Bitton turn-off, that's closed for flooding too. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date.
Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Today on the show, on the day that the government launched their Get Britain Back to Work drive amid concerns that the welfare bill could rise to a staggering £100 billion per year by 2030, it's also been announced on the same day that the owner of the Vauxhall plant plans to close its van-making factory in Luton, putting around 1,100 jobs at risk. That's a terrible blow for British industry, and we'll get the latest reaction to this breaking story. And next up, Donald Trump has threatened to slap 25% tariffs on all Mexican and Canadian goods going into America to force them to take action on border chaos that's seen as many as 21 million illegal immigrants stream into America over the past 4 years. The question is Trump's plan America first, or is it America's worst option? And residents in the Falkland Islands are gushing with joy after a giant oil field has been discovered under the islands that's now twice as big as that in the North Sea. And even better, Ed Miliband has no power to stop drilling licences on the islands, meaning it could be boom time, liquid black gold for the islanders. And I'll be joined by the Falklands hero Simon Weston to discuss what could be a glorious moment for the Falklands. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Let's get Britain working again. That's what the Labour Party said. And on the very same day, it's just been announced that 1,100 jobs are to go at the Vauxhall plant in Luton. And we're hearing that this is because of punitive net zero target. Electrical vehicle ratios, tariffs, tallies that it appears consumers simply didn't want. It's an astonishing story. They said Brexit would finish that plant. It didn't. Could net zero be the culprit? Get in touch usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your headlines with Katie Byrne.
Martin, thank you. A very good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said it was a very difficult day for Luton after the owner of Vauxhall announced plans to shut its van-making factory. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut the plant, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis, which also owns brands including Citroën, Peugeot and Fiat, said it would combine its electric van production at its other UK plant in Ellesmere Port. Rules imposed to speed up the transition to electric vehicles in the UK partly drove the decision, the company said. Stellantis is now in consultation with unions and employees over the proposals, which will also see it invest £50 million into the Ellesmere Port factory. Stellantis added that it is hoping to transfer hundreds of jobs to from the Vauxhall site in Ellesmere Port. Russia has barred cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper and Rachel Reeves, from entering the country under new sanctions published by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Jonathan Reynolds and Ed Miliband are also among the 30 British citizens listed. The Russian ministry said it was putting members of the UK's political and military establishment, as well as journalists, on its stop list. It comes as Russia earlier on expelled a British diplomat and accused him of spying. Downing Street has denied these allegations, labelling them as baseless. British troops have been drafted in to help the United States Air Force find out who is responsible for drones flying over 3 air bases in England, sources have said. The US Air Force spokesman said this afternoon that a small number of drones have again been spotted flying near US Air Force bases in Suffolk. The development comes after unidentified drones previously spotted between Wednesday and Friday of last week over the same 3 air bases. The US Air Force at the time said it was unclear whether they were considered hostile. Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall has announced the Job Centre will be brought together with England's National Careers Service to reform a system which she warned feels like you're back in the 80s or 90s. Introducing the Get Britain Working White Paper, Ms Kendall told the Commons, "We will create a new Jobs and Careers Service, overhauling job centres from a one-size-fits-all service that focuses on administering benefits into a genuine public employment service." Official figures show the unemployment rate for young people is at 14.8%, up from 12.1% a year earlier. The plans include a £240 million investment to overhaul the current network of job centres across Britain and more funding for mental health services. Pension Secretary Liz Kendall spoke in the Commons earlier on.
Bringing forward the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation, turning a department for welfare into a department for work, taking the first steps towards delivering our bold ambition of an 80% employment rate in a decade of national renewal. Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing short of fundamental reform is needed to turn the page on the last 14 years.
Elsewhere, 5 survivors have now been rescued and 4 bodies recovered after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. The Sea Story boat sank yesterday south of the Egyptian coastal town of Marsa Alam with 44 people on board, including 31 foreign nationals. The governor of the Red Sea says 7 people are still missing. 2 Brits are believed to be among them. The identity of those who have been recovered from the water is unknown. A police watchdog says the husband of a woman whose body was found in the boot of a car had been arrested 2 months prior over a domestic abuse report. The Independent Office for Police Conduct also said it would investigate police contact with 24-year-old Harshita Brella and her husband Pankaj Lamba. Miss Brella's body was found inside the boot of a silver Vauxhall Corsa parked in Ilford, East London, in the early hours of the 14th of November. Her husband Lamba is the prime suspect in the police investigation. An international manhunt to find him continues. Detectives suspect he has fled the country. A storm named Connell is to bring rain to southern Britain and beyond on Tuesday night, days after Storm Bert wreaked havoc. The Met Office says it's committed to learning the lessons from Storm Bert after criticism of its weather forecasts last week. The Weather Service also defended itself, saying observed rainfall totals were broadly in line with the forecast and the severe weather warnings issued in advance. The storm, which swept across England and Wales over the weekend, brought torrential rain, flooding and 80-mile-an-hour winds. At least 4 people have died since Storm Bert began, leaving communities badly flooded and turning roads into rivers. The clean-up after Storm Bert is continuing, with Environment Secretary Steve Reed warning more flooding is likely. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you very much. Now, sad story this afternoon. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut its Luton van-making factory, putting more than 1,100 British jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April, and that's come as Labour have been parading their desire to get Britain working again plan, focusing on getting young people off the dole. But how can we get people working again if the businesses don't want to invest? How can we get them working again if we're closing such a talismanic plant as the Vauxhall plant at Luton? Well, let's discuss this now with our political editor, Christopher Hope, who joins me in the the studio. Chris, this is, I feel, a deeply upsetting, tragic story. You know, Vauxhall plant at Luton, talismanic, so important to the community, so important to Britain, to our industrial base. And for many, many months, they've been crying out that they're being penalised by electric vehicle targets, and it didn't seem that government has listened. And now, Chris, we've reached this sad day.
It really is sad. This plant goes back to 1905, 1,100 jobs at risk. The company, Stellantis, owns Vauxhall, Peugeot, Fiat and Citroën. They want to move jobs up north to Ellesmere Port near Liverpool. We'll see how that goes down, because that's a good 3.5-4 hour drive from Luton to Ellesmere Port. They are saying here that this is in the context of the zero EV mandate. They're saying that electric car sales targets haven't worked as they should. It's across Europe. They're saying they had committed to EV production in this plant just 9 months ago, but the third quarter 2024 just passed. Revenue slumped by £10 billion to £27.6 billion, hit by Chinese imports. Yeah. But the scale of this, I mean, you can talk about, with respect to those who work in supermarkets, retail, hospitality, they are important jobs, but there is little more important than high-end manufacturing. A car plant supports a wide number of supplier jobs. On average, 3 times as many jobs will be in the sector, in the area around Luton and elsewhere in the wider UK economy, providing parts. These are high-end, high-end skilled manufacturing jobs that are going. Number 10 says, and some might say, frankly, this is not good enough for Number 10 because it appears to be driven by government policy, what's happening here. But Number 10 told us an hour ago this was a commercial matter for them. They refer to the announcement from Stellantis. They carry on. We know this is a concerning time for families of employees who may be affected. The government is backing wider industry with £300 million to drive up take-up of zero-emission vehicles. That'll be more EV charging points, you might imagine. But frankly, that barely touches the side of the problem here, and it goes nowhere to deal with the concern of families in Luton facing unemployment next April. It is a complete disaster, this. And a lot of this will go back onto this government and its policies about EV targets. The target for 2030, banning petrol vehicles by then, that is not being changed. We asked that this morning, asked again to the briefing we had with the PM spoken just now. That will be 2030, not 2035, as I have been relaxed to by Rishi Sunak.
And yet, Chris Hope, the zealotry of applying net zero targets seems to be almost a religion. Vauxhall, the plant there at Luton, Port Talbot, the steel plant, no longer smelts. It's an electric arc furnace. We import that steel from China. We offshore our pollution. North Sea oil licences not granted. Today we're seeing that they will be granted in the Falkland Islands because Ed Miliband can't stop them there. Are we not seeing the evidence before our eyes that net zero is just damaging the British economy?
People will say that these jobs are being sacrificed on the altar of net zero, a belief system that we need to hit these targets to cut our emissions. But I guess I was in Baku, as Leanne Anderson reminded me, along with the government, trying to follow what the PM's up to there, Ed Miliband as well. There is a concern about the global picture on cutting emissions, but I think we saw the last Tory government trying to be a bit pragmatic to get there gradually, rather than being an outlier. And maybe some might say, given the scale of these job losses and the impact on Luton, I mean, it's our deprived areas of Luton which will have people working there. This is an absolute kick in the teeth coming just before Christmas. Imagine having Christmas talking to your family, facing job losses in April. Again, the company does want to move jobs north to Ellesmere Port, and let's hope many of those workers can make that move. But it's a big move. If you've got kids in school, uprooting your family to do so, a huge blow here.
And how does this look for this government the day after? What, you were there yesterday. Yeah. You covered it on my show, the Confederation of British Industries. Rachel Reeves gave a speech there. It went down, it has to be said, like a lead balloon. The room was almost silent. You were saying they were one step away from booing, but they're too polite to boo. Today was the big Get Britain Working Again announcement, and this announcement on the same day. It's a disaster politically as well.
Here is the white paper, Get Britain Working. What this is the government policy to get people after benefits into work. But the problem is that how many jobs will there be for people who want to get into work? You've got the national insurance employers increase, you've got the increase in the minimum wage. That squeeze on Labour could be a problem. The jobs could be disappearing like water into the sand. That's a worry, I think. I was at that session with the CBI, the annual meeting, and it did feel like there was literally, in the 35 minutes I saw the Chancellor take questions and answers from employers, one solitary hand clap, and that was it. It felt very awkward. I think she is lauded. Rightly so, maybe, in the city. They see someone who has brought calm to the markets after Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, after the mess of Liz Truss's period in government. Yes, she's well received in the city, but employers, who the CBI are, who this company, Stellantis, are, they are less than happy. They are copping the bill, I think, for what this Labour government's doing. There are choices being made here by this government which are not going down well with business.
Certainly not going down very well in Luton area with Vauxhall. Can we talk about the other story about Russia expelling British diplomats, ministers, well, not allowing them to go to the country should they choose to do that at all, of course. And what's all this about? Why are they doing it?
Well, they are looking at. They've named a number of politicians here for the Labour government who now cannot go there. It is all goes back to the UK's decision last week, never confirmed by the UK, to allow missiles to be launched made by the UK into Russia, and that's the concern. So we have got an official being expelled from Moscow. Again, we're not naming him, obviously, and then we're looking at the UK government is saying today at this briefing we've been at today, they will see how they're going to respond. There can be a chess game. They removed one individual, UK, from Moscow, and we then might do something often a tit for tat, sending someone back to Moscow from the UK. And then wide to that, they've now sanctioned, I haven't got a list in front of me here, but there's around a dozen senior players in the Labour administration, along with 2 journalists sanctioned by Russia. So stop them going there, not they would go to Russia, but further attempt to control their movements.
What we know on that list is Rachel Reeves. We know that on the list is Angela Rayner, it's David Lammy, and also Ed Miliband. They're the kind of people that might be banned from Luton at the moment.
It's a further reminder, I think, of the tense nature, I think, of the way we are getting more and more into battle across the board with Russia.
Thank you very much, Chris Hope. And let's move on to another political story that's been dominating the past few days, and it's this. The online petition calling for a general election has now officially passed the 250,000 mark. As you can see there on the live ticker tape, 2.671 million signatures, and it's still rattling away. But will this actually change anything? Do these petitions matter, or just an indication of the lack of popularity of Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour government? Well, I can now speak with Alex Thomas, the Programme Director at the Institute for Government. Alex, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. So this petition is going up like a fruit machine, but nevertheless, no doubt Sir Keir Starmer won't give us any fruit. It won't have any teeth, will it? But is it an embarrassment for the government in a major manner?
Yeah, afternoon. Thanks for having me on. I mean, I think you're right in that I don't think it will change very much or have very many consequences, and that's because all that happens if these petitions get over 100,000 signatures is there's a debate in what's called Westminster Hall, which is like an annex, a small debating chamber off Parliament, and you could expect a minister to stand up and say, thank you very much, understand we've had this petition, but the government's recently been elected by a large majority. But I also think, and this might be a bit more controversial, I don't think it should matter very much. Of course, you've got 2.7 million people registering their discontent, but that is not representative of the electorate as a whole. It's also, we had 6.1 million people signing a petition to revoke Article 50, and I don't think that should have mattered either. So I think these petitions really, don't matter very much. It's a good, healthy way of expressing discontent, but it shouldn't be anything more than that.
And as you rightly say, 6 million people signed that petition for a second referendum, and that wasn't adhered to. No doubt, Alex Thomas, a lot of people watching this show would have been very miffed if it was. But one of the people demanding a second referendum, demanding a roll of the dice when they didn't get the answer they wanted then, was the now Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. He wanted another go then, and now he won't let the electorate have another go this time. Is it a case of double standards? But surely if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Well, I think what's important is that we have elections in this country, we have referendums, they're hard fought, they're hard contested, and then the people respect the results of those elections or referendums. That's the name of the game. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all that people might express their views on whether the government's doing a good job or not on through these petitions. That's a good, healthy part of democratic debate, but it doesn't mean we should suddenly run back and say, oh, well, 2.5 million people are unhappy with what the way the government's doing. That means we have to rerun the contest. I mean, the other thing to remember, 2.7 million people, that's about 5% of the electorate. The Labour Party got 10 million votes at the last election. The Conservatives and the Reform Party together got 11 million votes at the last election. Those are the numbers that matter at the ballot box rather than signing an online petition. It's also worth saying we don't even know that all of these signatories are real or live in the UK. You have to check a box and put in your postcode. But it'd be very, very easy to invent some numbers, to fake a postcode and to just claim that you were a British national or resident and to therefore sign the petition. So there's no real security around this at all, unlike with proper elections or referendums.
OK, Alex Thomas, I'm also joined in our studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. He's got a question for you.
Yeah, Alex, I'm old enough, I'm sure you are, to remember, I think it was 6 million signed the rejoin the EU the petition post the EU referendum, and that got nowhere. Is it time for maybe some degree of sanction to be brought in, editing of these referendum, the petition calls, because it does get hopes up, I think, amongst people who don't really understand the nature of our politics. You can't just, it's not how we run this country. I think it maybe give false hope to millions of people.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I was checking the numbers actually, because it was 4.1 million signed asking for a second EU referendum, and then 6.1 million a few years later signed just to kind of revoke Article 50. And as you say, that was never going to happen. I mean, it was part of a campaign. I think maybe you could restrict the sort of eligibility criteria for these petitions a little bit, but equally, political campaigns are good. It's good that people are energised and want to talk about these things, and it's good that there's a lively debate about it. So I'd be a bit wary about shutting them down. But what I think, it's the job of all of us to try and explain is that these things can't bear more than they actually carry. They're a campaigning tool. They're not a sort of register your voice and then something is going to change. Unlike, interestingly, and I did the legislation for this back in the day, the recall petitions, where MPs can be recalled. So that's a whole other debate. But under certain circumstances, you then can sign a petition that does have a real consequence. So it is a bit of a shift in our democracy.
OK, Alex Thomas, I think we're in an age now where people think they get what they want by clicking on a mouse and filling out a petition. You don't. I tell you what, all those millions of people out there, join a political party. Get involved, make a difference. If it's Reform, if it's the Green Party, if it's Plaid Cymru, whoever it is, actually get off your backside, get out there, get involved with politics. You don't change the world via petitions. We do it with shoe leather. Alex Thomas, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Sorry, I get off my high horse there. That's a programme director at the Institute for Government. And thanks to you, Chris Hope. Now, coming up, I'll speak with the former Health Minister, Lord Bethell, about whether junk food should come with health warnings like those on ciggy packets. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, our next guests have been working closely with celebrities and MPs to help clean up our planet.
Very important. Think Ocean was founded in 2021 with two main goals. One, educating the next generation to make sure that they know when they're growing up that naturally we have to take care of the planet and cleaning pollution that's already in the environment.
Well, joining us now to tell us more is Think Ocean's founder, Hugo Valdez-Vera, and the co-founder, Nolene Mariappan. Really good
morning,
to see you both this morning. So, Nolene, let's start with you. What is Think Ocean, and why did you want to start this back in 2021?
Yes, so Hugo had actually been working on the environment and climate action for quite a long time. When he moved to the UK, he realised that there was a growing problem with plastic pollution and that more needed to be done because people weren't actually seeing the link between plastic, the impact on the environment and climate change. So he founded the organisation and I joined him with 3 goals, really. Education, looking at technology to scale solutions, and looking at how we develop more circular economy programs. So actually looking at reusing, recycling, actually creating local economies from what people would consider waste.
Hugo, just how bad is plastic pollution around the world, and especially here in the UK?
Well, it is bad, but we don't know the extent of how bad it is. You know, this is not much interest from the bigger players or, you know, some government for us to know every detail of the pollution. So if we know that is from 1 to 10 is 2, probably it's about 6.
Oh.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:25 and I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, here's a question for you. Should junk food come with health warnings like you get on cigarette packets? Well, that's exactly what one campaigner is calling for. Has he got a point, or is this once again a classic example of the nanny state gone mad? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former Health Minister, Lord James Bethell. Lord Bethell, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your esteemed company. So, that's the question. Is this the kind of thing that should be happening? Adverts to carry warnings like fag packets for food, or has the government got no right to tell us what to eat?
Martin, I don't like the fact that people are talking about this. I'm a free market kind of guy. I don't want the government to be involved in what we're eating. But the crisis is huge. It's costing us an absolute fortune. Our healthcare costs are huge. 1 million people have just dropped out of the workforce, which is costing us billions. Our welfare bill is through the roof. We literally can't afford to maintain our armed forces because the health costs of the country are so big. So with huge regret, I'm afraid I am an advocate of doing something about it. The public are really confused. They want to know, is this food good for me or not?
But do you think there's anybody out there, seriously, who doesn't know that cigarettes are bad for you, who doesn't know that alcohol is bad for you? Everybody knows that burgers and pizzas aren't good for you, but they like them because they're tasty and they're cheap.
That's part of it, and they are quite addictive. You know, I find it gets very moreish, all that sugar and fat mixed together in an ice cream. It's designed to go into our Neanderthal brains and yearn for it. But also, there's a huge amount of advertising. Every day, I've just come on the tube to get here with my 10-year-old son. We were absolutely bombarded with messages on our telephones, from outdoor advertising. We are presented with this ideal version of food, which is all about hamburgers and ice cream and, as you say, chocolate cereals. That's what's presented to us. If you go to the tube station, there were 4 different outlets at Westminster. I couldn't buy my son anything that was healthy whatsoever. Zero choice. So I think when you're bombarded with that level of messaging, it's fair to balance the equation by putting some labels on the food to warn exactly what is good for you and what isn't.
But is there any evidence that these adverts work? I mean, people cut down on smoking fags because they got so blooming expensive. People were priced out of the market. Do these adverts actually work? Do these health warnings actually work? Or does it just make politicians feel a bit better, but really, they're a bit toothless?
The cigarette example is a really good one. We knew that cigarettes killed you in 1954. I mean, a very long time ago, right? And yet there are still 5 million people in the UK who are smoking, and it remains the single biggest cause of cancer. In other words, we've done micro measures for decades, and we're still living with the problem of cigarettes. If we do the same with junk food, if we drag our feet and don't intervene decisively, and if we're dealing with these levels of obesity in 50 years' time, I promise you we'll be bankrupt, and our children will have a very uncertain and frankly, limited future. Now, I'm an advocate for really leaning hard on this right now, because there is a different option, which is that we eat more healthily and live much longer, happier, healthier lives.
But isn't the problem with that is that healthy food is so expensive? What we should be doing, surely, is helping people to eat healthier. We should be educating them on the benefits of that, rather than slapping adverts on foods like fags with diseased lungs, I don't know, cancerous mouths. People know that it's bad for them, but they don't necessarily respond to being hectored. They don't respond to being taxed, being lectured and told what to do. They should be assisted. And a good place to do that would be to make food more affordable.
Well, Martin, healthy food is not intrinsically expensive. A bag of carrots, it's been cheaper today than it has ever been in the history of mankind. What is a problem is that the choices that we're given by the food companies are really limited. For an average family where maybe both people are working, it is really convenient to buy a pizza and to buy a hamburger, to order a Deliveroo. Half the food we eat is now prepared by someone else. Why? Because that is very convenient. If you're both working and you've got kids, I know how tempting and useful it is to have a food industry that presents us with this extremely convenient way of eating. But the food that they give us is very addictive and very, very bad for us. There are too many calories, too much sugar, too much salt, and that combination of sugar and fat, although it's very Moorish, does bad things to our hearts and to our bodies. So we need to think about a completely different food system that presents us with healthy choices at an affordable price. That is completely doable, but our food companies do have to step up to the challenge.
Superb stuff. Thanks for joining us. Expert's opinion there. Former Health Minister Lord James Bethell. But I've got to say, I just really fancy a pizza now. Thank you, Lord James Bethell. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Sorry for being a bad person, but I do. Lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including an excellent story as residents in the Falkland Islands are gushing with joy after a giant oil discovery under the islands is twice as big as that under the North Sea. And guess what? Even better, Ed Miliband has no power to stop drilling licences in the Falklands, meaning it could be boom time for the islanders. Liquid black gold could be flowing, and I'll be joined next by the Falklands war hero Simon Weston. Can't wait for that. But first, here's your news headlines, and it's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. Your top stories this hour. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said it was a very difficult day for Luton after the owner of Vauxhall announced plans to shut its van-making factory. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut the plant, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis, which also owns brands including Citroën, Peugeot and Fiat, said it would combine its electric van production at its other UK plant in Ellesmere Port. Rules imposed to speed up the transition to electric vehicles in the UK partly drove the decision, the company said. Stellantis is now in consultation with unions and employees over the proposals, which will also see it invest £50 million into the Ellesmere Port factory. Stellantis added that it is hoping to transfer hundreds of jobs to the site in Ellesmere Port. Russia has barred cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper and Rachel Reeves, from entering the country under new sanctions published by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Jonathan Reynolds and Ed Miliband are also among the 30 British citizens listed. The Russian ministry said it was putting members of the UK's political and military establishment, as well as journalists, on its stop list. It comes as Russia earlier on expelled a British diplomat and accused him of spying. Downing Street has denied these allegations, labelling them as baseless. British troops have been drafted in to help the United States Air Force find out who is responsible for drones flying over 3 air bases in England, sources have said. A US Air Force spokesman said earlier this afternoon that a small number of drones have again been spotted flying near US Air Force bases in Suffolk. The development comes after unidentified drones were previously spotted between Wednesday and Friday of last week over the same 3 air bases. A Ministry of Defence spokesman said, we take threats seriously and maintain robust measures at defence sites. We are supporting the US Air Force response. Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall has announced the Job Centre will be brought together with England's National Careers Service to reform a system which she warned feels like you're back in the 80s or 90s. Introducing the Get Britain Working White Paper, Ms Kendall told the Commons we will create a new jobs and career service, overhauling job centres from a one-size-fits-all service that focuses on administering benefits into a genuine public employment service. Official figures show the unemployment rate for young people is at 14.8%, up from 12.1% a year earlier. The plans include a £240 million investment to overhaul the current network of job centres across Britain and more funding for mental health services. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2536 and 1.1972 euros. The price of gold is £2,094.72 per ounce. And the FTSE 100s closed the day at 8,258 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The rest of today will be fine for most of us, at first at least, with just a few showers around, but there is some more rain arriving in the south later, courtesy of this area of low pressure, which will move up from the southwest, bringing cloud, rain and wind, and it will affect southern parts overnight into central areas first thing Wednesday before clearing away during the course of the day. So turning wet and windy across the southwest through the evening. The heaviest rain moving along the south coast there. On top of the rain that we've already had recently, that could cause further localised flooding before it eventually turns drier into Wednesday. And there'll be gusty winds accompanying that. Further north, a very different start to the day for Northern Ireland, Northern England, much of Scotland. Frost and some dense fog patches about first thing, especially for Northern Ireland. But showers follow the more persistent rain in the south on Wednesday, drying up across the southwest as well as Wales during the morning. Clear spells there for Northern England, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still some showers affecting coastal parts, especially for northern Scotland. A cold start to the day, temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered spots and only slowly recovering through the morning. Nevertheless, it's across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England where we'll see the brightest weather on Wednesday. Again, just a few showers into the north. Some fog patches across Northern Ireland could be slow to clear. Meanwhile, into the afternoon, the more persistent wet weather does clear the east and the southeast. Although it does turn increasingly windy, that's going to make it feel cold. Highs of 11 Celsius in the south, 4 to 6 further north. Then going into Wednesday night, we're going to see extensive clear skies and, as a result, with light winds as well, temperatures dropping away. So widespread frost and some dense fog around first thing Thursday before a bright day generally. Some rain or showers in the west on Friday and Saturday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in North Yorkshire. The A19 at Eggborough remains shut at the scene of an accident, just east of Nottingley, of course. On the M62 in Cheshire, the inside lane has been closed eastbound from from junction 11 to 12 towards the M60 where a lorry's broken down. Once you get onto the M60 in Greater Manchester, one lane shut clockwise just after 1 at Stockport Pyramid following an accident, not being helped by an earlier collision that was in lane 3. On the M6 in Warwickshire, the inside lane of 4 closed southbound, junction 3 to 2 north of Coventry following an accident, and many roads in the west and southwest of England are shut or impassable because of flooding. In Worcestershire, the A443 shut between Lindridge and Eardiston, and the Team Street is being described as impassable through Tenbury Wells. In Somerset, northwest of Bath, the A431 shut between Kelston and Bitton, also because of heavy surface water. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, fantastic story here because it's emerged that a giant oil discovery in the Falkland Islands is even bigger than even first thought. An independent report into the North Falkland Basin has upgraded estimates of recoverable oil resources, and it's said to be twice the annual output of the entire North Sea. And the government of the Falkland Islands has gone ahead and approved production. And that's despite the Labour Party blocking new oil and gas licences shortly after coming into office in July, of course, in the North Sea. And I'm joined now, I'm delighted to say, by the Falklands War veteran, Simon Weston. Simon, an absolute pleasure to see you, my old son. Isn't this just amazing news? The Falkland Islands, there's liquid gold underneath those islands. This could pump prosperity into that population, and they can drill, baby drill, they can get minted, they can be sovereign, they can be independent. Simon, I'm excited. Are you?
I am indeed. I'm thrilled for the people of the Falklands. There's been long thought, belief that there was oil there. They just had to find it. But now they've found it. You know, it's just wonderful news. It's exciting for them because they're their own economy, their own country. They have their own rights and laws, and they choose to be under British sovereignty, and that's their choice. But I do think it's going to create a lot of a backlash from others who are trying to create something else, try and create another story. But you know, as long as the islanders want to remain under British sovereignty, then that's their choice. I remember talking to the islanders quite a while ago when I was down there, and they were talking about the fact that they negotiated an oil contract if they were ever to discover oil. And they were talking about that they would get roughly 11% of the profit. And I cheekily suggested, well, maybe they could give maybe 0.5% or 1% to all the veterans who got badly hurt and families who got killed and everything, because otherwise they wouldn't have this right. They wouldn't be able to explore and exploit their own natural resources. So, you know, you never know. I may never know my luck, that there may be a windfall coming my way, but I'll be cheeky enough to ask for that one. But no, I'm thrilled for them. I wish them nothing but great luck and prosperity.
Yeah, Simon Weston, I think you're absolutely right, and I think you're all correct. There could be some diplomatic incident, shall we say, between Ed Miliband, of course, the Energy Secretary in the UK, has ruled anything out like this in the North Sea. No future licences. The last remaining coal mine at Whitehaven, that was closed down. In fact, we've just seen today the Vauxhall plant at Luton is sadly closing because of electric vehicle targets that it seems, Simon, nobody really wanted. But the Falklands stands under its own sovereign laws, and their laws that the locals, you know better than I, they fiercely defend. You fought for them. You were injured gravely fighting for them. And I just feel that this is a wonderful, wonderful moment for the islanders out there who could enjoy richness and prosperity. And who could hold that against them, Simon?
I'm sure there'll be somebody out there. There's always naysayers. There's always doom mongers who want to throw water onto somebody else's happy party. For me, I just want them to go on to succeed and have the right to choose whoever they want to live under, whoever's laws, whoever's protection, the right to their own self-determination. You know, this is what freedom and democracy is all about. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, there's an awful lot of flaws in the ecological debate right now, you know, because it really isn't as one-sided as people try to make it out in the evangelistic world of green. I was listening to the co-founder of Greenpeace saying that the world needs more CO2 because we're running dangerously short. So it flies in the face of all of the evangelistas about EV and everything else. And, you know, it goes to prove that they're having terrible trouble selling EVs right now, and even the second-hand ones, because they're having to renegotiate this with the government over how many percentages they can sell or they have to sell, because people just aren't buying into this doctrine that, you know, everything is as doom and gloom, as people say, you know, and in the end of the day, if we do get it wrong, there's hundreds of billions, if not trillions, that are going to be squandered on something that we genuinely don't know. We don't have absolute evidence over. So I hope the islanders are able to exploit it, enjoy the wealth from it. Britain enjoyed it for a long time. Norway is still enjoying theirs, even though they've got their own ecological sort of platform, but they're selling their oil and gas to the rest of the world. So they're still enjoying it. And what do we look at? We look at, you mentioned war previously. The fact is that the war in Russia and Ukraine is driving oil prices and gas prices through the roof, and the world is struggling without it. So, you know, and all the prices that we have in Britain are going through the roof because of this zest to go for zero carbon, which is crazy when you listen to the Greenpeace statements, which fly right in the face of all that, and all the other professors who've lost their jobs in America in the universities who've also gone in a different direction. So, you know, maybe we ought to listen to both sides of the debate instead of just following on piecemeal to a doctrine that seriously could be very flawed.
Simon Weston, I think a huge amount of people will be raising a glass to your common sense here. Can I also ask you about, you mentioned that word sovereignty and the key strategic importance of the Falklands. It's been proven it's not just a rock in the middle of the ocean. It now has a huge resource, it has a key strategic interest. And of course, the conversation then goes on to the Chagos Islands. May I ask you about that? Because this is something else that seems to have been surrendered, to have been squandered by this government. What's your take on the Chagos Islands, if I may ask you, Simon Weston?
Well, I think the Chagos Islands is flawed in its debate. You know, nobody had sovereignty over it. The people who went there first, which lo and behold just happened to be us, we had the Chagos Islands, and we still have them. We can still reverse the decision, but I think it's flawed in its conception of handing it over. I think that we make a strategic error. We're still a player in the world. We still have some part to play in the world's security. And the Americans treasure the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia because it's a great staging post, listening post, and it also can launch operations from there. But likewise in the Falklands, because if anything does come through the southern passages, then we have then a base, and a secure base, to be able to protect an awful lot. And we only have to go back as far as the Second World War and look how parts of South America favoured the German war machine. And we were able, from the Falklands, to be able to repel that. And we did fight against them in the First World War and in the Second. So we must be very careful about what it is that we think we know, rather than actually reading about it and understanding properly. Because I think an awful lot of people just take sides without actually going in and studying and reading the history of things. But as long as the islanders wish to remain under British sovereignty, I don't think anybody's got the right now to tear that up and throw it away. It's not like any of the other complaints that have gone out about other island territories that other countries have. This is one that's very favourable to the UK. And I think strategically and financially, they could actually be a great support to the UK. So, you know, let's be very careful what we do, what we say, and how we react to all of this. But I'm just thrilled for the islanders, and I just hope that they're able to enjoy it.
Simon Weston, absolutely magnificent. Thank you so much. Real patriotic, proud words, beautifully put. Thank you very, very much for joining us on GB News today. Simon Weston, the legend, thank you very, very much. Now, coming up, Boom Radio's boss has blasted the BBC's plan for a Radio 2 spin-off, calling it typical BBC arrogance. He says it could steal 35% of Boom's audience, threatening the station's very survival. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Should we talk about Gordon Brown? He's been talking about this child benefit cap, and he's, given speeches about it and feels very, very strongly about it. He says there's twice as many children living in poverty as pensioners in this country, Paula. It's made the front of the eye, but pretty much that's the only paper taking this up because everything else being dominated by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I just don't think you should have child upon child if you can't afford it. And I believe anyone in a committed relationship should be able to have one child, definitely. Or maybe even two, but one, definitely. But they want over two. I mean, I just think that's insane. If you're not working, why do you expect taxpayers to pay for one, two, not just two, three, four, five, six?
You've taken the words out of my mouth, and I just think this is really
It's not a radical
natural.
thing, yeah.
If you can't afford them, what normal person would have them? Now, Isabel tends not to agree with me on this, but I just don't think the state should be paying for children.
But it's not paying for children, is it? It's just...
Well, it's aiding. It's given the money taxpayers are paying. And let's not forget, 1 in 3 children are now born to mothers not born in the UK. And we've got an ever-growing benefit bill.
30% of children born in this country, their parents were not born in the UK.
But we have a fertility problem, don't we?
Maybe Starmer and his team are willing to find a compromise or give up a bit of ground on this issue. But it's very rare that Gordon Brown kind of makes a campaigning moment. And that will cause... obviously, this is an issue that, amongst the backbenchers, is difficult for Starmer.
I think, I might be wrong, I have a feeling Nigel Farage and Gordon Brown are on the same page on this issue, which might surprise people. I might be wrong.
Very, very interesting.
So just be clear, what does Brown want? What's he looking for?
He's basically saying that this cap on the child benefit is heinous and basically hurts children.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 10 to 6 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Boom Radio's boss has criticised the BBC's plan for a Radio 2 spin-off, calling it typical arrogance. He reckons it could steal 35% of Boom's audience, threatening the station's very survival. And now it's up to Ofcom to decide if a full review is needed. Fair competition is at stake. Well, I'm delighted. I'm now joined by the CEO of Boom Radio, Phil Riley. Phil, welcome to the show. Boom, magnificent radio channel. You spotted a niche. You got right in there, built a huge audience. I used to work in the magazine game, Phil. The BBC all the time used taxpayers' money to squash a commercial rival. And now it seems they're trying to do the same to you. You must be livid.
We are very annoyed because the BBC did literally walk away from serving people in their late 50s and 60s and 70s about 5 years ago. They stopped playing as much music of that generation as people wanted. They let some of those great heritage presenters like Ken Bruce and Steve Wright, they let them go or sideline them. So when we stepped in and created Boom and launched it in February of 2021, we got a great reaction, and it's been a fantastic 3.5 years for us to grow the audience to the sort of million regular listeners we've got. And it really is arrogant, I think, of the BBC 3.5 years in to suddenly say, well, you guys are doing okay, aren't you? Maybe we should step back in and take your audience away from you. That's the truth of it, really. Here is that they moved away. We spotted a gap. We put our own hands into our own pockets and used our life savings and our pension fund to get this thing up and running. And suddenly they decide that they made a mistake and they want to come back. Well, that is arrogance to me.
Yeah, because, Phil, what happened is they were slavishly going after the youth market, of course, and BBC Radio 2, you're like, well, hang on a minute, that's not the market. Off you go to Boom, you make a hugely successful product, and now they've realised the error of their ways. They're trying to snuff you out by going back into the same space and using taxpayers' money. It seems like I feel, a very unfair use of licensed payers' money.
Well, that's what we are arguing to Ofcom. I mean, we're saying two things, really. The first is that there's nothing they're proposing that we're not already doing. We're playing a really broad range of 60s and 70s and some 50s music. We've got great world presenters throughout the day on the station. We're doing everything that they claim they're going to be doing, and they say it's going to be innovative, but it's not. It's a rip-off of what Boom already is doing. And as you say, the BBC is constantly telling people it's strapped for cash. Well, if they're strapped for cash and they're having to cut back on existing services, where have they got the money from to go and launch this? It's ridiculous.
Well, maybe it's from Gary Lineker's salary, but look, that's a separate conversation and one not for today. Look, let's hope it's Boom time for you at Boom Radio. That's the CEO of Boom Radio, Phil Riley.
Thanks,
Best
Martin.
of British to you, mate. You spotted a market, you made it your own, and now they're trying to squash you down. Now, quickly, we've got a few your says. Let's get in touch. Lee Anderson, he was on my show earlier on, and Adrian says this: thank you, Lee, for speaking common sense. Lee, Kay says this: Lee Anderson says it like it is. What a legend. Steve says this: unfortunately, the benefit system is too generous and full of loopholes that get exploited. And that's it from me today, but I'm back 3 till 6 p.m. tomorrow. But don't worry, because up next is Jubes & Co. for the fiercest debate show in town. But first, here's your weather, and here's Aidan McGibbon. Have a great evening.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The rest of today will be fine for most of us, at first at least, with just a few showers around, but there is some more rain arriving in the south later, courtesy of this area of low pressure, which will move up from the southwest, bringing cloud, rain and wind, and it will affect southern parts overnight into central areas first thing Wednesday before clearing away during the course of the day. So turning wet and windy across the southwest through the evening. The heaviest rain moving along the south coast there. On top of the rain that we've already had recently, that could cause further localised flooding before it eventually turns drier into Wednesday. And there'll be gusty winds accompanying that. Further north, a very different start to the day for Northern Ireland, Northern England, much of Scotland. Frost and some dense fog patches about first thing, especially for Northern Ireland. But showers follow the more persistent rain in the south on Wednesday, drying up across the southwest as well as Wales during the morning. Clear spells there for Northern England, much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still some showers affecting coastal parts, especially for northern Scotland. A cold start to the day. Temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered spots and only slowly recovering through the morning.